The stagecoach died 3 miles outside Silver Ridge, Wyoming. Not broke down. Died. The axle snapped with a sound like a gunshot, and the whole contraption lurched sideways into a snowbank, throwing Martha and her children into the frozen dirt. The driver, a mean-eyed bastard named Coltrane, who'd spent the last 50 miles complaining about charity cases taking up paying seats, didn't even bother climbing down to check if they were hurt. "End of the line," he shouted, already wrestling the team loose. "Town's that way. 3 miles, maybe 4. Best get walking before dark." Martha pulled herself up, tasting blood where she'd bit her tongue. Her hands were so cold they'd gone numb an hour ago. Beside her, Will, 10 years old and skinny as a fence post, was already helping his little sister stand. Rose's lips had gone blue. The child was 6 years old and hadn't complained once in 3 weeks of travel, which scared Martha more than if she'd been screaming. Eli, the middle boy, just sat in the snow and stared at nothing. He'd been doing that a lot lately. "We can't walk 4 miles, Martha said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Not in this cold, not with the children." Coltrane didn't look at her. "Then you'll freeze. Either way, ain't my problem." He meant it. Martha could see it in the way he worked the harness, quick and efficient, already thinking about the warm hotel room waiting for him in Silver Ridge. She'd seen that look before, on the faces of every shopkeeper who'd turned her away, every landlord who'd smiled while raising the rent, every man who'd looked at her husband's debts and decided Samuel Hale's widow wasn't worth the trouble. "Please," she said, and hated herself for it. "Just the children. Take them with you. I'll walk." "Lady, I ain't running a charity service." "I'll pay you." That got his attention. He turned, eyebrows raised. "Yeah? With what?" Martha dug into her coat pocket. Her fingers closed around the last of their money, 17 cents in copper pennies, worn smooth from 1,000 hands. It was supposed to buy food when they reached Silver Ridge. It was supposed to last until she found work. It was supposed to save them. She held it out. "It's all I have." Coltrane looked at the pennies. Then he laughed, a short, ugly sound that carried across the frozen wasteland. 17 cents for 3 kids and 4 miles of bad road? Hell, I wouldn't do it for $17. He climbed onto the lead horse. Martha's hand shot out and grabbed his boot. "Wait!" He kicked her, not hard enough to break bones, but hard enough to send her sprawling backward into Will, who caught her before she hit the ground. By the time she'd found her footing, Coltrane was already riding away, the horses kicking up snow behind him. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then Will said very quietly, "Ma, what do we do now?" Martha looked at her children, really looked at them. Will, trying so hard to be brave even though his hands were shaking. Rose, barely able to stand. Eli, still sitting in the snow with that 1,000-yard stare she'd seen on soldiers who'd come back from the war broken in ways that didn't show. 3 months ago, they'd had a house, a life. Samuel had been alive, working the mine in Missouri, coming home tired but smiling. Then the collapse. 32 men buried under half a mountain. Samuel's body had been one of the lucky ones. They'd found enough to bury. The mine company paid nothing. The debts came due anyway. And one morning, Martha woke up to find the bank had sold their house to cover what Samuel owed, just like that. No warning, no mercy. She'd taken the children and run. Now here they were. End of the line, literally. "We walk," Martha said. "Ma, Rose can't." "Then I'll carry her." She bent down and scooped Rose up. The little girl weighed almost nothing. That scared Martha too. 3 weeks ago, Rose had been plump and healthy. Now she felt like a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. "Will you help your brother? We're going to walk to that town, and we're going to find somewhere warm, and we're going to survive this. You understand me?" Will nodded. He always nodded. The boy had been forced to grow up the day his father died, and sometimes Martha looked at him and wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. 10 years old. He should have been climbing trees and getting into trouble, not helping his mother survive. They started walking. The wind hit them like a fist. Wyoming winter wasn't like Missouri winter. Missouri got cold, sure, but it was a wet cold that seeped into your bones slow. This was different. This was a mean cold that wanted you dead. It screamed across the open plains with nothing to stop it, carrying snow that felt like broken glass against exposed skin. Martha bent her head and pushed forward. Rose buried her face against Martha's shoulder. Behind them, she could hear Will's voice, low and steady, talking to Eli, keeping him moving, keeping him focused. 1 foot forward, then another, then another. The road disappeared under fresh snow. Martha followed the ruts left by Coltrane's horse, praying they led somewhere. Her arms burned from Rose's weight. Her feet went numb. Her lungs ached with every frozen breath. Just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep... She stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Will's hand gripped her elbow. Ma, let me take her. No. Ma, you're gonna fall. I said no. She didn't mean to snap at him. The words just came out hard and sharp, cutting through the wind. Will flinched but didn't let go of her arm. Good boy. Smart boy. He knew she needed the help even if she was too proud to ask for it. They kept walking. Time stopped meaning anything. Maybe they'd been walking for an hour, maybe 5. The sun was setting. Martha could see the sky turning that particular shade of purple that meant full dark was coming. But she couldn't tell if they were getting closer to Silver Ridge or just walking in circles. Then Eli stopped. I can't, he said. Just that. 2 words. Flat and empty. Martha turned. Her son stood in the middle of the road, snow gathering on his shoulders, staring at nothing. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. Eli, we have to keep moving. I can't. Yes, you can. It's not much farther. I can't. I can't. I can't. His voice rose to a wail. Will tried to grab him, but Eli pulled away, staggering sideways into the snow. He fell to his knees and just stopped. Shut down completely. Martha knew that look. She'd seen it in the mirror enough times. This was what breaking looked like. She set Rose down carefully. The girl immediately curled into a ball, trying to conserve warmth, and knelt beside Eli. Her frozen hands cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me, she said. Her voice came out rough. Listen to me, baby. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I know this is hard, but we don't get to quit. Not here. Not now. Your father didn't raise quitters, and neither did I. Pa's dead. The words hung in the frozen air between them. I know, Martha said. I know he is. But we're not. Not yet. And if we sit down in this snow, we will be. All of us. Is that what you want? Eli didn't answer. His eyes were empty. Martha pulled him close, wrapping her arms around him even though she had no warmth to give. Please, she whispered. Please, baby. Just a little farther. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Eli's arms came up and wrapped around her, and he started crying, really crying, the way he hadn't since the day they buried Samuel. His whole body shook with it. Martha held him and let him break, because sometimes that's what people needed. Sometimes you had to fall apart before you could stand up again. When the crying finally stopped, Eli pulled back and wiped his face with a sleeve. His eyes were red but clearer. Present again. Okay, he said quietly. Okay? Martha helped him stand. Will had already picked up Rose, cradling his little sister against his chest. The boy met Martha's eyes over Rose's head, and in that moment he looked 40 years old. They started walking again. The lights of Silver Ridge appeared just as full dark hit, scattered pinpoints of yellow warmth against the endless black. Martha wanted to cry with relief. Instead, she pushed harder, forcing her frozen legs to move faster. The town materialized around them like a ghost. Buildings rose out of the snow, most of them dark and shuttered for the night. A few windows glowed with lamplight. Somewhere a dog barked. The wind carried the smell of wood smoke and cooking meat. They stumbled onto what passed for a main street. Martha's legs gave out and she went down hard, catching herself on her hands. The frozen mud scraped her palms raw. Will set Rose down and tried to help Martha up. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She could barely stand, but she forced herself upright anyway because that's what you did. You kept getting up until you couldn't anymore. They stood in the middle of the street, 4 frozen scarecrows covered in snow, and looked around. Silver Ridge was bigger than Martha expected. 24 buildings at least, maybe more. She could see a general store, a hotel, what looked like a church. At the far end of the street, a saloon spilled noise and light into the darkness. Where do we go? Will asked. Good question. Martha's mind felt slow, sluggish with cold. They needed shelter, food, warmth. They needed the hotel. They'd try the hotel first. She led them to a 2-story building with a painted sign that read Silver Ridge Hotel and Boarding House. Warm light glowed in the windows. Martha could see shapes moving inside. She pushed open the door. Heat hit her like a wall. After hours in the freezing cold, the warmth actually hurt. Martha's face burned. Her fingers screamed as feeling returned. Rose whimpered. Eli made a sound like he'd been punched. A woman looked up from behind a desk. She was maybe 50, with iron gray hair and eyes that took in the 4 of them in one sharp glance. Her expression went from welcoming to guarded in about half a second. "Help you?" she said. Martha tried to speak. Her jaw didn't want to work right. She forced the words out. "Need a room. Just for tonight. Rooms are $2. $2. Martha had 17 cents. "I can work," Martha said quickly. "I can clean, cook, whatever you need. Just let us stay tonight and I'll work it off tomorrow. Don't need help. Please, the children. Look, honey." The woman's voice wasn't unkind, but it was final. "I run a business, not a charity house. You want a room? You pay like everyone else. Otherwise," she shrugged. Martha felt something crack inside her chest. "We walked 4 miles in the snow. My children are freezing. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for work. And I told you I don't need help. Now, unless you're planning to pay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're dripping snow all over my floor." Will's hand found Martha's. His fingers squeezed, not pulling her toward the door, just holding on, reminding her he was there. Martha looked at the woman, then she looked at her children. Then she turned and walked back out into the cold. The wind hit them again. Rose started crying, quiet, exhausted sobs that tore at Martha's heart. Eli had gone silent again. Will just stood there, holding Martha's hand, waiting for her to tell them what to do next. What to do next? That was the question, wasn't it? They couldn't survive the night outside. The temperature was still dropping. By morning, they'd be frozen corpses in the snow. Martha looked down the street. Most of the buildings were dark. The church might take them in, but something told her a frontier preacher wouldn't be much more charitable than the hotel woman. Not to strangers. Not in winter. Her eyes landed on the general store. It was closed, but she could see a light in the back. Someone was still there. "Come on," she said. The store's front door was locked, but Martha pounded on it anyway. Loud enough to wake the dead. She didn't care who she disturbed. Her children were freezing and she was out of options and out of pride. The light in the back moved. Footsteps. Then the door opened a crack and a man peered out. He was maybe 60, with a face like old leather and suspicious eyes. "We're closed," he said. "I need to buy supplies. Store opens at 8 tomorrow. My children need food. Now." The man looked past her at Will, Eli, and Rose. His expression didn't change. "Even if I sold to you, which I ain't inclined to do at this hour, what are you planning to pay with?" Martha pulled out the 17 cents, held it up like it was treasure. The man's lip curled. "That won't buy much. It'll buy something. Not enough to feed 3 kids? Then I'll take whatever it will buy." They stared at each other. Martha didn't blink, didn't look away. She'd learned something important over the past 3 months. Desperation could look a lot like strength if you held yourself right. Finally, the man sighed and opened the door wider. "Fine. Come in. But make it quick." The store was warm, not hotel warm, but warm enough. Martha's children crowded around the pot-bellied stove in the corner, while she followed the shopkeeper to the counter. "Name's Garrett," he said, pulling out a ledger. "I run the store and the post office both. You got a name?" "Martha Hale. Those are my children, Will, Eli, and Rose." "Hale." Garrett frowned. "Don't know any Hales around here. We're from Missouri. Long way from home. Don't have a home anymore." That came out harder than she meant it to. Garrett looked up from his ledger, really seeing her for the first time. His expression shifted slightly. Not to pity, exactly, but something close to it. "Looking for work?" he asked. "Yes." "Won't find much this time of year. Most ranches already hired their winter hands. Town's not big enough for much else. I can do anything. Clean, cook, mend clothes, work livestock. You know ranching? I learn fast." Garrett made a non-committal sound. He pulled out a small sack and started filling it with dried beans, added some jerky, a half loaf of bread that looked a few days old. When he was done, he set it on the counter. "That's about 17 cents worth," he said. "It ain't much." "It's enough for tonight. Thank you." Martha took the sack. Her hands were shaking, from cold or exhaustion or relief, she couldn't tell. She turned to leave. "Wait," Garrett said. She stopped. "There's a barn out back of the church. Pastor won't mind if you sleep there tonight. It's got hay, keeps the wind out. Better than nothing." It was better than nothing. Martha felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me. Just trying to keep my conscience clear." He paused. "You really come all the way from Missouri?" "Yes." "Why here?" Good question. Martha had asked herself that 100 times. The truth was, she'd just kept running west until the money ran out. Silver Ridge was random, meaningless. It wasn't destiny or fate or anything poetic like that. It was just where the road ended. "Because I had to end up somewhere," she said. Garrett nodded like that made sense. "Well, good luck to you, Mrs. Hale." They spent the night in the church barn, buried in hay for warmth. Martha divided the food into 4 portions and made the children eat every bite. She didn't eat her own share, told them she wasn't hungry, which was a lie. She was starving, but they needed it more. Rose fell asleep first, curled against Martha's side, then Eli. Will stayed awake longer, staring up at the barn rafters. "Ma?" he said quietly. "Yeah, baby? Are we going to be okay?" Martha wanted to lie, wanted to promise him everything would work out fine. But she was tired of lying, and Will deserved better than comfortable fiction. "I don't know," she said, "but we're going to try." Will thought about that. "That's all we can do, I guess. That's all anyone can do." He rolled over and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. Martha lay awake in the darkness, listening to her children breathe. Outside, the wind howled. Snow pattered against the barn walls. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. She thought about Samuel, wondered what he'd say if he could see them now. Probably something reassuring and useless. Samuel had been good at that, making pretty speeches about faith and perseverance, while Martha did the actual work of keeping them alive. She missed him anyway. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of frozen roads and empty pockets and doors closing in her face, one after another, until there was nowhere left to go. She woke to Rose coughing. Dawn light filtered through the barn walls. Martha sat up, heart pounding. Rose was curled into a ball, her whole body racked with deep, wet coughs that sounded like they were tearing her apart from the inside. "Rose, baby." The little girl couldn't stop, couldn't breathe. Her face went red, then purple. Martha grabbed her, held her upright, pounded her back. Finally, the coughing fit passed and Rose sucked in a desperate breath. Then she coughed again, and this time there was blood on her lips. Martha's world narrowed to a single point of terror. Blood. Rose was coughing blood. That meant, it could mean, no. No, she wouldn't think it. Couldn't. Will and Eli woke up. They saw the blood and went very still. "We need a doctor," Martha said. Her voice sounded calm. Strange how calm she sounded. "Right now." They stumbled out of the barn into a town just waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few early risers moved along the street. Martha grabbed the first person she saw, a young man in a cowboy hat. "Where's the doctor?" he pointed. End of the street. Blue building. "But Doc Morrison don't usually—" Martha was already running. The doctor's office was small but clean. She burst through the door without knocking, Rose in her arms. An older man looked up from his desk, startled. "Please," Martha said. "My daughter. She's coughing blood." To his credit, the doctor didn't ask questions. He took Rose from Martha's arms, laid her on an examination table, and started checking her over. Martha stood back, hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Will and Eli crowded in behind her. She could feel them shaking. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor straightened up. "It's not consumption," he said. Martha's knees nearly gave out. "Not consumption, thank God, But she's got a bad chest infection," the doctor continued. "Probably from exposure. How long have you been traveling?" 3 weeks. In this weather? He shook his head. She needs rest, warm food, medicine. And she can't be sleeping in barns or stagecoaches anymore. She needs a real bed in a warm house, or this infection will turn into something worse. How much? Martha asked. For the medicine? $3. $3. Might as well have been 300. I don't have $3, Martha said. I have 17 cents. The doctor's expression didn't change. Then I can't help you. Please. She's 6 years old, Mrs. Hale. His voice was tired. I wish I could help, I do. But I've got bills to pay, same as everyone else. I can't give away medicine to every... The door behind them opened. Martha turned. A man stood in the doorway, and something about him made her breath catch. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled the frame. His face was all hard angles and frost-damaged skin, weathered from years in the Wyoming wind. Gray touched his temples. His eyes were the color of winter ice. But it wasn't his size or his looks that stopped her. It was the way he moved. Careful. Controlled. Like a man who'd learned to take up as little space as possible despite his frame. Like a man who'd spent years trying to disappear. Silas, the doctor said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you in town. The man, Silas, didn't respond. His eyes moved from the doctor to Martha to Rose lying on the examination table. He took it all in with one sweep. The blood on Rose's lips, Martha's desperate expression, the two boys trying to make themselves small behind their mother. Then he looked at the doctor. What's she need? His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. Medicine for chest infection, $3. Silas pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted out 3 silver dollars, set them on the desk. The doctor blinked. Silas, you don't have to give her the medicine. It wasn't a request. The doctor sighed and started pulling bottles from a cabinet. While he worked, Martha found her voice. I'll pay you back, she said to Silas. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Martha felt pinned by that gaze. How? He asked. Fair question. She didn't have an answer. I'll work. Whatever you need. I can clean, cook, mend. You know ranching? I learned fast. Something flickered across his face, not quite a smile. Where are you staying? The barn behind the church. In December? We don't have much choice. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Martha watched him think. She could almost see the argument happening behind those winter eyes. The part of him that wanted to help warring with the part that knew better than to get involved. Finally, he said, I got a ranch 5 miles north. Need someone to help with the house. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. Winter work. Temporary. Martha's heart jumped. You're offering me a job? Temporary? He said again, like he needed to make that clear. Through winter. Come spring, you'll need to find something else. I'll take it. Don't you want to know what it pays? I don't care what it pays. We need shelter and food more than money right now. Silas nodded slowly. Room and board for you and the kids. Small wage on top. Not much, but enough. He paused. It's hard work. The ranch is isolated. No neighbors for miles. Gets cold. Gets lonely. A lot of folks can't handle it. We can handle it, Martha said. He looked at her children again. Will stood straight despite his exhaustion, trying to look capable. Eli had stopped staring at nothing. He was watching Silas with wary curiosity. Rose was breathing easier now, the color returning to her face as the medicine worked. All right, Silas said. Finish up here. I'll get supplies and meet you at the general store in an hour. We leave after that. He turned to go. Wait, Martha said. I don't even know your full name. He paused in the doorway. Silas Granger. Then he was gone. The doctor handed Martha a bottle of dark liquid. 3 spoonfuls a day until it's gone. Keep her warm and rested. She should be fine in a week or 2. Martha took the medicine. Her hands were shaking again. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Silas. The doctor shook his head. Though I'll be damned if I know what's gotten into him. Man hasn't spoken more than 10 words at a time in 8 years, and he sure as hell never helped anyone before. Why not? The doctor gave her a strange look. You really don't know who he is? Should I? Silas Granger used to be the friendliest rancher in the county, always helping neighbors, always smiling. Then his wife died in the fever epidemic of '72. Watched her waste away for 3 weeks, couldn't do a damn thing about it. After they buried her, something in him just broke. He shut down, cut himself off from everyone. These days he comes to town maybe twice a year, buys his supplies, and leaves without talking to anyone. Martha looked at the door where Silas had disappeared. Then why help us? That, the doctor said, is a damn good question. An hour later, Martha and her children stood outside Garrett's general store. Silas emerged carrying supplies: flour, coffee, salt pork, dried beans. He loaded everything into a wagon hitched to 2 massive draft horses. "Get in," he said. They climbed into the back. The wagon bed was lined with hay for insulation. Silas handed Martha a wool blanket. "For the girl," he said. Martha wrapped Rose in it. The little girl was already looking better, the medicine working fast. She studied Silas with open curiosity. "Are you a giant?" Rose asked. Silas's eyebrows went up slightly. "No. You're really tall like a giant." "Rose," Martha said sharply, "mind your manners." But Silas's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "I'm just tall, not a giant." "Oh," Rose thought about that. "Do you have a horse?" "Got 2, right there." He nodded at the draft horses. "Can I ride one?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I said so." "That's not a reason." "Rose, that's enough," Martha said. "Leave Mr. Granger alone." They rode in silence after that. The wagon creaked through the snow. Silver Ridge disappeared behind them. The plains opened up, endless white stretching to distant mountains. Will sat next to Martha, watching everything. Eli had found a spot near the supplies and was running his hands over the burlap sacks, methodical and soothing. Rose fidgeted with the blanket. "Mr. Granger," Martha said carefully, "why are you doing this?" Silas didn't turn around. "Need help on the ranch." "The doctor said you've been alone for 8 years." "That's right." "So why now?" For a long time he didn't answer. Martha thought maybe he wouldn't. Then he said very quietly, "Because I looked at your boy trying to protect his family, and I saw myself 30 years ago, right before my father died." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Martha understood. Sometimes the past reached out and grabbed you when you weren't looking. Sometimes you saw yourself in a stranger's eyes and remembered who you used to be before life broke you into pieces. Sometimes that was enough to make you do something stupid and kind. The ranch appeared after an hour of riding, a cluster of buildings hunched against the wind beneath the shadow of the mountains. The main house was bigger than Martha expected. 2 stories, solid timber construction, windows that caught the late afternoon light. But something about it felt wrong. It took her a moment to realize what it was. The place looked dead, not abandoned. The fences were maintained, the barn looked solid, but dead in the way houses get when nobody really lives in them anymore, when they're just shelters instead of homes. Silas stopped the wagon and climbed down. "Welcome to the Granger Ranch." Martha helped her children down. They stood in a small cluster, staring at the house. Even Rose had gone quiet. Silas started unloading supplies. "House is through that door. I'll show you around after we get this put away." "I can help," Will said. Silas glanced at him. The boy was maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, but he stood there with his shoulders back trying to look useful. "All right," Silas said. "Grab that sack of flour." Will grabbed it, nearly fell over from the weight, gritted his teeth and carried it anyway, staggering toward the house. Silas watched him go. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or memory. Then he picked up 2 supply crates like they weighed nothing and followed. Martha took Rose's hand and walked into her new home. The inside was worse than the outside. Everything was clean. Silas clearly kept the place maintained, but it felt like a museum. Furniture covered in dust cloths, empty shelves, no pictures on the walls, no personal touches anywhere. It was a house where someone had stopped living years ago. "Bedrooms upstairs," Silas said, setting down the crates. "Pick whichever ones you want. I'm in the master at the end of the hall. Kitchen's through there. Bathrooms behind the stairs. There's a water pump, but you'll need to prime it first." He spoke like he was reading from a manual, giving instructions, not welcoming them home. "Where do you want the supplies?" Martha asked. "Kitchen pantry. I'll show you." He led them through a doorway into a kitchen that might have been beautiful once. High ceilings, large windows, a massive iron stove. Now it just felt hollow. Over the next hour, they put away supplies and explored the house. The children picked bedrooms. Will took the smallest one. Eli chose one near the stairs. Rose insisted on the room with the best view of the mountains. Martha found a room for herself near the children. The whole time, Silas stayed downstairs, giving them space, staying separate. As the sun set, Martha came back downstairs to find Silas building a fire in the kitchen stove. "I can do that," she said. "I know, but you've had a long day." He finished with the fire and straightened up. For a moment they just stood there, this widow and this widower, two broken people who'd somehow ended up in the same broken house. "Thank you," Martha said, "for everything. The medicine, the job, this." Silas nodded. "You start work tomorrow. I'll expect breakfast at 6, dinner at 7. Between those times, the house is yours to manage however you see fit. I'll be working the ranch. What about the children? They can help if they want, or not. Up to you. Mr. Granger, just Silas." "Silas, then," Martha chose her next words carefully. "I need to know what you expect from this arrangement. You're letting 4 strangers live in your house. That's not nothing. I expect you to work hard and cause no trouble. That's all. And come spring, you'll leave." He said it flatly. A fact, not a threat. Martha nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Silas grabbed his coat from a hook. "I'll be in the barn. Holler if you need anything." He left. Martha watched through the window as he crossed the yard, a dark shape against the snow. He disappeared into the barn and didn't come back out. She turned to find her 3 children standing in the doorway, watching her. "Is this really where we're staying?" Rose asked. "Yes, baby. It's big." "It is. Is Mr. Granger nice?" Martha thought about that. Nice wasn't the right word. Silas Granger wasn't nice. He was hard and closed off and clearly damaged in ways that showed in every word he didn't say. But he'd paid for Rose's medicine when he didn't have to. He'd offered them shelter when no one else would. He'd given them a chance. That had to count for something. "I think he's trying to be," Martha said. That night, she made dinner from the supplies Silas had bought. Nothing fancy, just beans and salt pork and bread. But it was hot, and there was enough for everyone to eat until they were full. The children devoured it like they hadn't eaten in weeks, which Martha realized they basically hadn't. Not a real meal, anyway. When Silas came in from the barn, she had a plate waiting for him. He stopped in the doorway, staring at it. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "You're paying me to cook. This is me cooking." He sat down slowly, like he'd forgotten how, picked up his fork, took a bite. Martha watched his face, waited for some reaction. Nothing. He just ate, methodical and silent. After dinner, the children went upstairs. Martha could hear them moving around, settling in, testing out their new beds, whispering to each other. She started washing dishes. Behind her, Silas stood. "I'll be in the barn," he said. "There's bedrooms upstairs." "I know, I'm sleeping in the barn." Martha turned to look at him. "Why?" "Because it's better that way." He left before she could argue. Martha finished the dishes in silence. When she was done, she walked to the window and looked out at the barn. A faint light glowed through the cracks in the walls. Silas Granger was sleeping in his own barn rather than stay in the house with them. The doctor's words came back to her. Something in him just broke. She understood that. She'd felt pieces of herself break over the past 3 months. The difference was she'd kept moving anyway, because she had children who needed her. Silas didn't have anyone, so he turned into a ghost haunting his own life. Martha went upstairs and checked on her children. All 3 were asleep. Actually asleep, not just pretending. For the first time in weeks, they looked peaceful. She went to her own room and lay down on a real bed with real blankets. The mattress was soft. The room was warm. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the winter sky. They'd made it. Against every odd, despite every obstacle, they'd survived. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they were safe. Martha closed her eyes and slept without dreaming. Martha woke to the sound of someone chopping wood. The sky outside her window was still dark. That deep blue-black that meant dawn was coming but hadn't arrived yet. She lay there for a moment, disoriented. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet. For 3 weeks she'd been sleeping on stagecoach benches and barn floors, always half awake, always listening for danger. This felt wrong. Too comfortable. Like a trap. Then she remembered. The ranch. Silas Granger. They were safe. The chopping continued, steady and rhythmic. Martha pulled herself out of bed and went to the window. In the yard below, she could see Silas splitting logs by lantern light. Even from here, she could see his breath fogging in the frozen air. The man slept in a barn and woke before dawn to chop wood. She dressed quickly and went downstairs. The kitchen was cold. The fire had died overnight. Martha rebuilt it, working by feel in the darkness. She'd done this 1,000 times in Missouri. Her hands knew the work. By the time Silas came in from the yard, she had coffee brewing and was pulling ingredients from the pantry. He stopped in the doorway, watching her. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." "Always am." He hung his coat and moved toward the stove, drawn by the coffee smell. Martha poured him a cup without asking. He took it and wrapped both hands around the warmth. "What do you normally eat for breakfast?" she asked. "Whatever's quick." That's not an answer. Silas almost smiled. Almost. "Eggs if we got 'em. Bread? Sometimes just coffee." "Do we have eggs?" "Chickens are in the coop behind the barn. Haven't checked yet." "I'll send Will." She moved to the stairs, but Silas's voice stopped her. "Let the boy sleep. He looked half dead yesterday." Martha turned. "He's tougher than he looks." "I'm sure he is. Still. Let him sleep." It wasn't a command exactly, more like a suggestion from someone who understood what exhaustion could do to a growing kid. Martha nodded and went back to the kitchen. They worked in silence. Martha started mixing biscuit dough while Silas sat at the table with his coffee. She could feel him watching her, not in a threatening way, more like he'd forgotten what it looked like to have another person moving around his kitchen. "You know your way around a ranch kitchen," he said finally. "My father had a farm in Ohio, small place. I learned young." "What happened to it?" "He died. Cholera. My mother couldn't keep it running alone, so she sold it and moved to St. Louis. That's where I met Samuel." Martha's hand stilled for a moment. "My husband." Silas didn't say anything, just sipped his coffee and waited. "He was a good man," Martha continued. "Not always a smart man, but good. Worked himself to death trying to provide for us. Literally." She went back to the biscuit dough, kneading harder than necessary. "Took a job in the mines even though he knew it was dangerous. Told me the money was too good to pass up. 3 months later, the whole shaft collapsed." "I'm sorry." The words were quiet, sincere. Martha glanced at him and saw something in his face that made her throat tighten. Recognition. He knew exactly what it felt like to watch someone you love die. "The doctor said your wife passed 8 years ago," Martha said carefully. Silas's expression closed like a door slamming. "He talks too much." "I'm not trying to pry." "Then don't." The words came out sharp. Martha flinched, then felt anger flare in her chest. She'd been handling men's moods her whole life, and she was tired of walking on eggshells. "Listen," she said, turning to face him fully. "You want me to work here? I'll work. You want me to keep my distance? I'll do that too, but I'm not going to tiptoe around you like you're made of glass. If you don't want to talk about your wife, fine. Just say so without biting my head off." Silas stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he set down his coffee cup. "You're right," he said. "I apologize." Martha hadn't expected that. "Oh, well, all right then. I don't talk about Clara, not with anyone. It's not personal." "I understand." "Do you?" "My husband's been dead 3 months and I can barely say his name without feeling like I'm choking. So yeah, I understand." Something shifted in Silas's face, not quite softening, but easing, like a muscle unclenching. "Fair enough," he said. Footsteps on the stairs broke the moment. Will appeared in the doorway, dressed but rumpled from sleep. "Morning, Ma," he said. Then more carefully, "Mr. Granger." "Just Silas," the rancher said. "You sleep all right?" "Yes, sir. Better than I have in weeks." "Good. You're going to need your strength. Got work to do today." Will straightened up immediately. "What kind of work?" "Ranch work, feeding livestock, checking fences, mucking out stalls. Think you can handle that?" Yes, sir, Martha interrupted. He's 10 years old. I know how old he is. I'm not asking him to break horses, just basic chores. Silas looked at Will. You want to help or not? I want to help, Will said quickly. Martha wanted to argue, wanted to protect her son from being worked too hard. But then she saw the look on Will's face, eager, determined, desperate to prove himself useful. The boy had been carrying the weight of being the man of the family for 3 months. Maybe letting him do real work would help more than coddling him. All right, she said, but you eat breakfast first. By the time the biscuits were done, Eli and Rose had stumbled downstairs too. They ate together at the kitchen table, the first real family meal they'd had since Samuel died. It was awkward and quiet, everyone still figuring out how to exist in the same space, but it was something. After breakfast, Silas stood and grabbed his coat. Will, you're with me. Eli, you want to come too or stay inside? Eli looked at his mother, uncertain. Martha touched his shoulder. Go on, you might like it. The boy nodded and followed Will toward the door. Silas paused before leaving. What about the girl? Rose looked up from her plate, biscuit crumbs on her face. I want to see the chickens. Rose, you're still recovering, Martha said. The doctor said I needed rest, not prison. Martha bit back a smile. Fine, but you stay close to the house. And if you start feeling tired, you come right back inside. I promise. The 3 children trooped outside after Silas. Martha watched through the window as he led them across the yard toward the barn. Will walked right beside him, already peppering him with questions. Eli hung back a few steps, cautious. Rose darted ahead, spinning in circles and talking to herself. Martha turned back to the kitchen and really looked at it for the first time in daylight. It was worse than she'd thought. Not dirty. Silas kept things clean enough, but neglected. The curtains were stiff with dust. The shelves were disorganized. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, but half of them had gone moldy. The floor needed scrubbing. The windows needed washing. It would take weeks to put this place right. Martha rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She started with the pantry, pulling everything out and reorganizing it properly. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, all the basics were there, but scattered and haphazard. She found mouse droppings in one corner and made a mental note to set traps. Found a sack of beans that had gone bad and threw it out. By noon, the pantry was clean and organized. Martha moved on to the windows, scrubbing away years of grime. Her hands ached. Her back protested. She ignored both and kept working. This was what she did, what she'd always done. When life fell apart, you cleaned something, put things in order, took control of whatever small piece of the world you could reach. She was elbow deep in wash water when the door opened and her children tumbled in, red-cheeked and breathless. Ma, you should see the barn. Will's eyes were shining. It's huge, and Silas has this system for organizing all the tools, and he showed me how to properly fork hay so you don't waste it, and there's a cow named Bessie who tried to step on me, Eli added quietly. The chickens are mean, Rose announced, except the brown one. She likes me. Martha smiled despite her exhaustion. Sounds like you all had quite the morning. Where's Silas? She asked. Still in the barn, Will said. He said we should come eat lunch. He'll eat later. Of course he would. The man probably took his meals alone by choice. Martha made sandwiches and sent the children back outside with explicit instructions to make Silas eat something. They returned 20 minutes later with the sandwiches untouched. He said he's not hungry, Will reported. Martha's jaw tightened. She grabbed the plate and marched out to the barn herself. She found Silas in one of the stalls, examining a horse's hoof. He didn't look up when she entered. Your children said you're not hungry, Martha said. I'll eat later. You'll eat now. She set the plate on a nearby barrel. I didn't make food so you could starve yourself. I'm not starving myself, I'm working. You can do both. Silas set down the horse's hoof and straightened up. He was even bigger standing at full height, and the barn suddenly felt smaller. But Martha didn't back down. This is my job, she said. Cooking, keeping house, making sure people eat. If you're going to pay me to do it, then you're going to let me do it properly. That means you eat regular meals at regular times. Understood? He stared at her. Then, to her surprise, he almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. Good. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Martha. It was the first time he'd used her given name. She turned back. Thank you, he said. For the food. She nodded. You're welcome. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Silas woke before dawn and did the heavy ranch work, repairing fences, tending livestock, chopping wood. Will shadowed him like a devoted pupil, learning everything Silas would teach him. The boy absorbed it all with desperate intensity, like he was trying to become a man as fast as humanly possible. Eli found his place among the animals. He had a gift for it, Martha realized. The horses calmed around him. The chickens tolerated him. Even Bessie the cow, who apparently hated everyone, let Eli near her without complaint. Rose terrorized everyone equally. She asked Silas approximately 800 questions a day. She named all the chickens. She tried to ride one of the barn cats. She was exhausting and fearless and exactly what the ranch needed. Meanwhile, Martha transformed the house. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, washed all the curtains, and beat the dust from every rug. Organized the chaos in the pantry and the cellar, fixed the wobbly table leg, patched the holes in the upstairs walls where the cold leaked through. Slowly, room by room, the house stopped feeling like a mausoleum and started feeling like a home. Silas noticed. He didn't say anything, but Martha caught him looking around sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or grief. It was hard to tell with him. They ate dinner together now. Silas had stopped trying to hide in the barn. He still didn't talk much, but he sat at the table and listened while Will recounted the day's adventures, and Rose chattered about the chickens, and Eli ate in peaceful silence. It was almost normal. Then 2 weeks after they'd arrived, the temperature dropped. Martha woke to a stillness that felt wrong. The air had that particular quality that meant snow was coming, heavy snow, the kind that buried fence posts and trapped cattle and killed anyone stupid enough to be caught outside. She found Silas in the barn, already preparing. "Storm's coming," he said without preamble. "Big one. We've got maybe 6 hours before it hits." "What do you need me to do?" He looked at her. "Keep the children inside. Keep the fires going. If the wind gets bad, stay away from the windows." "That's it? You're going to handle everything else alone?" "That's how it works." "Like hell it is." Martha crossed her arms. "I grew up on a farm, remember? I know what a storm means. You'll need help." "It's going to be dangerous. I don't care." "Martha." "Silas, listen to me. If this storm kills the cattle, the ranch dies. If the ranch dies, we all starve. So I'm helping whether you like it or not." They stared at each other. Martha could see him trying to come up with an argument, trying to find a way to protect her from her own decision. Finally, he said, "You ever worked cattle in a blizzard before?" "No." "Then you're going to do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you. No arguments, no questions. Understood?" "Understood." "All right, then." He turned back to the supplies he was gathering. "We've got about 4 hours of work before the storm hits. After that, we just try to survive it." Martha told the children what was happening. Will wanted to help, but she shut that down immediately. "You're staying inside with your brother and sister. Keep the fires going. If the storm gets bad, go to the cellar. There's food and blankets down there." "Ma, I can help." "No?" Her voice came out harder than she meant it to. "I need you here. I need you to keep Eli and Rose safe. Can you do that?" Will's face fell, but he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Good boy." She kissed each of them on the forehead, then followed Silas out into the cold. The next 4 hours were brutal. They moved the cattle closer to the barn, driving the herd through frozen fields while the wind picked up. Martha's hands went numb inside her gloves. Her face burned from the cold, but she kept working, following Silas's terse instructions. He was different out here. Focused, efficient. Every movement had a purpose. He didn't waste breath on unnecessary words, just pointed where he needed her to go and trusted her to figure it out. And she did. Martha had forgotten how much she knew about working animals, about reading weather, about doing what needed to be done even when your body screamed at you to stop. It came back to her in pieces. Muscle memory from a childhood spent helping her father. By the time they'd secured the cattle, the sky had turned the color of old bruises. The wind was howling. Snow had started to fall, not gentle flakes, but hard pellets that stung like buckshot. "Inside," Silas said. "Now." They ran for the house. The wind nearly knocked Martha off her feet. Silas grabbed her arm and hauled her forward. They crashed through the door and slammed it behind them. The children were huddled by the fire. Rose ran to Martha immediately. "You're freezing." I'm fine, baby. Martha's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. Just cold. Silas was already moving toward the windows, checking the shutters. Storm's going to last all night, maybe longer. Don't open any doors for any reason. If you hear something outside, ignore it. Animals get confused in storms. They'll try to get in anywhere that looks warm. What about you? Will asked. I'm staying in the barn with the livestock. You can't, Martha said. You'll freeze. Barn's insulated. I'll be fine. Silas, he turned to look at her. His face was already red from windburn, his hair thick with snow. The cattle are going to panic when the storm really hits. If I'm not there to keep them calm, they'll hurt themselves. Maybe kill each other. I don't have a choice. Then I'm coming with you. No. You can't do it alone. I've done it alone for 8 years. I'll manage. He pulled his coat tighter. Take care of your children, Martha. That's your job. The ranch is mine. He was gone before she could argue, disappearing back into the storm. The blizzard hit an hour later. Martha had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed. It threw itself against the house like it was trying to tear the walls apart. Snow piled against the windows so thick they couldn't see out anymore. The children crowded together by the fire. Rose was crying quietly. Eli had gone silent again, staring at nothing. Will sat between them, one arm around each, trying to be brave. Martha paced. She fed the fire. She checked the shutters. She made soup nobody wanted to eat. And all the while she thought about Silas alone in that barn. Hours passed. The storm got worse. Around midnight, something crashed against the side of the house. A branch, maybe. Or debris. Rose screamed. Martha gathered all 3 children close. It's all right, she said. The house is strong. We're safe. But she didn't feel safe. She felt trapped and helpless while Silas fought to keep the ranch alive. Dawn came eventually, though they could barely tell. The sky was still black with snow. The wind hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten worse. Martha made breakfast mechanically. The children picked at their food. Nobody spoke. Then, around mid-morning, the wind suddenly dropped. Not stopped, just dropped to a low howl instead of a scream. Martha rushed to the window and scraped away enough snow to see out. The world was white, completely white. Snow had buried everything, fences, equipment, half the barn. Drifts were piled 10 feet high against the house. And there, struggling through the snow toward them, was Silas. He was moving wrong, slow, staggering. Martha ran for the door. The children shouted after her, but she ignored them, yanking the door open and pushing into the snow. It came up to her thighs. She waded through it, her legs burning with effort. Silas saw her and tried to wave her back. Get inside. Shut up. She reached him and grabbed his arm. He was shaking. His face was gray. His lips had gone blue. Together they fought their way back to the house. Will had the door open, holding it against the wind. They fell through it and Martha kicked it shut behind them. Silas collapsed by the fire. He was breathing hard, his whole body shaking with cold. Martha started pulling off his coat. It was frozen stiff, crusted with ice. The cattle, he managed. Lost 3, maybe 4. Rest are okay. I don't care about the cattle right now. You should, that's money. Silas, stop talking. She got the coat off and started on his boots. His socks were wet. When she pulled them off, his feet were white. Frostbite. Not bad enough to lose toes, but bad enough to hurt. Martha grabbed blankets and wrapped them around him. Then she made hot coffee and forced him to drink it. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the cup. The children watched from across the room, wide-eyed and silent. After a while, the shaking stopped. Color started coming back to Silas's face. He leaned back against the chair and closed his eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. Martha wanted to yell at him, wanted to shake him and demand to know why he thought dying alone in a barn was an acceptable option, but she was too tired, and he looked too broken. You're an idiot, she said instead. He almost laughed. Yeah. If you ever pull something like that again, I won't. You better not. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Silas opened his eyes and looked at her. You were right, he said. I shouldn't have tried to do it alone. Damn right you shouldn't have. If there's a next time, there won't be a next time. Next storm, we work together or we don't work at all. Silas nodded slowly. Then he said something that surprised her. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. I'm a widow with 3 kids and no money. Tough is all I have left. No. He held her gaze. It's more than that. You don't just survive, you fight. Martha didn't know what to say to that. Before she could think of a response, Rose appeared at her elbow. Is Silas going to die? The little girl asked. No, baby. He's just cold. He looks dead. Rose. But Silas was smiling, an actual smile, small but real. I'm not dead, just stupid. Ma says you're an idiot. Your ma's right. Rose studied him seriously. You shouldn't sleep in the barn anymore. It's cold and you could freeze and die, and then who would take care of the cows? She's got a point, Martha said. Silas looked at her, then at Rose, then at Will and Eli, who'd edged closer to listen. All right, he said finally. I'll sleep in the house. Rose beamed. Good, because I already picked which room you should have. You did? The one at the end of the hall. It has the biggest bed. That's my room. I know. You should use it instead of being sad in the barn. Silence. Martha held her breath, waiting for Silas to shut down, to close off the way he always did when anyone got too close. Instead, he said very quietly, Okay. Rose threw her arms around his neck. Silas went rigid, clearly not expecting it. His eyes met Martha's over the little girl's head, panicked, confused, like he'd forgotten how to handle affection. Martha just smiled. The storm lasted 3 more days. They spent it trapped inside together, and something fundamental shifted. Silas stopped retreating to the edges of the room, started talking more. Let the children ask their endless questions without shutting them down. Will quizzed him about ranching until Martha thought Silas's head might explode. But the man answered every question patiently, explaining things in ways a 10-year-old could understand. Eli showed Silas the wooden animals he'd been carving from scrapwood. Silas studied them seriously and offered suggestions on technique. By the end of the second day, they were working side by side, carving in comfortable silence. Rose simply adopted Silas as her new favorite person. She sat on his lap during meals, demanded he read to her from the books on his shelves, fell asleep against his shoulder while he stared at the ceiling like he couldn't quite believe this was his life now. And Martha watched it all, feeling something dangerous growing in her chest. Don't, she told herself. Don't get attached. This is temporary. Come spring, you're leaving. But it was already too late. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. The sun came out hard and bright against the snow. Silas and Martha spent the day digging out, clearing paths, checking on the surviving cattle, assessing the damage. They'd lost 4 head. 2 sections of fence were down. The chicken coop had partially collapsed under the weight of the snow. It could have been worse. Much worse. That night, Silas moved his things out of the barn and back into the master bedroom. He did it without ceremony, just carried his few possessions upstairs while the children watched. At dinner, he sat in his usual chair. But something was different. He was there in a way he hadn't been before. Present. Part of the family instead of just tolerating their presence. After the children went to bed, Martha and Silas sat by the fire. She was mending one of Will's shirts. He was oiling a piece of tack that had gotten wet in the storm. Thank you, he said suddenly. Martha looked up. For what? For not letting me die in that barn. You're welcome. I mean it. I was being stupid, stubborn. If you hadn't come out, but I did. So stop thinking about what might have happened and focus on what did. Silas nodded. He went back to the tack, working the oil into the leather with steady, practiced movements. Can I ask you something? Martha said. You're going to anyway. Fair point. Why did you really let us stay? The truth. Silas was quiet for a long time. Martha thought maybe he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the tack and looked at the fire. Because when I looked at you in that general store, I saw someone who'd been where I was. Someone who'd lost everything and kept going anyway. And I thought, he paused, I thought maybe if I helped you, it would mean I hadn't wasted the last 8 years, that something good could still come from all this. You haven't wasted anything, Martha said softly. Haven't I? He finally looked at her. I shut myself off from everyone. Turned this place into a tomb. Spent 8 years waiting to die. If that's not waste, I don't know what is. You survived. That's not nothing. Surviving isn't living. No, but it's a start. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind had finally died. The storm was over. Your children are good kids, Silas said. You did well with them. They did well with themselves. I just tried not to mess them up too badly. Will's going to be a fine rancher someday. He's got the instinct for it. Martha felt her throat tighten. He'd like to hear you say that. I'll tell him tomorrow. Silas picked up the tack again. Eli's got a gift with animals, never seen anything like it. And Rose? He shook his head. That girl could talk a rock into moving. Martha laughed. She certainly talks enough. She asks good questions, though. Makes you think. She asks too many questions. Maybe, but she makes this place feel less empty. There it was again, that dangerous thing growing in Martha's chest. She focused on her mending, keeping her hands busy so she wouldn't do something stupid. We should probably talk about spring, she said. The temperature in the room dropped. Silas went very still. What about it? Our arrangement. You said we'd leave when the weather turned. That's what I said. Is that still what you want? Silence. Long enough that Martha looked up from her sewing. Silas was staring at the fire, his jaw tight. I don't know, he said finally. I thought I did. Now I'm not sure. Martha's heart was beating too fast. What changed? Everything. Nothing. He ran a hand through his hair. You've been here 3 weeks and already this place feels different, more alive. The children make noise and track mud and leave their things everywhere. And instead of hating it, He stopped. You what? I don't want it to stop. The words hung in the air between them. Martha set down her sewing. Silas, but I don't know if I can do this, he continued, almost talking to himself now. I don't know if I remember how to have people in my life, how to care about someone without being terrified they'll leave. Everyone's terrified of that. Not like this. You don't understand. When Clara died, it nearly killed me. Took me years just to remember how to breathe. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't go through that again. Martha moved to the chair next to his. Close enough to touch, but not touching. Nobody's asking you to, she said gently, and nobody's promising to stay forever, because that's not how life works. But right now, in this moment, we're here, and we're not going anywhere unless you tell us to leave. Silas looked at her, really looked at her. His eyes were wet. What if I'm not enough, he whispered. What if I can't give you what you need? What if you can? They stayed like that, the fire burning low, the house quiet around them. Two broken people trying to figure out if they could build something from the pieces. Finally, Silas stood. I should get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. Silas, what? We'll figure it out, he said. I don't know how, but we will. He left. Martha heard his footsteps on the stairs, the creak of his bedroom door. She sat alone by the dying fire and wondered what the hell she was doing. She'd come here looking for survival, for a way to keep her children fed and safe through winter. She hadn't planned on this, on feeling things, on wanting things, on letting herself imagine a future that lasted longer than spring. But she was imagining it anyway, and that terrified her almost as much as it gave her hope. The week after the blizzard, something broke inside the house. Not physically. The walls still stood, the roof still held, but something invisible cracked open, and through that crack came a kind of warmth Martha hadn't felt in years. Silas started smiling. Not often, and never for long, but it happened. Usually when Rose said something ridiculous, or when Eli showed him a new carving, or when Will managed to do some ranch task exactly right. The smile would flicker across his face like sunlight through clouds, then disappear just as fast. But it was there. The children noticed too. Will stopped being quite so careful around Silas, started making jokes, testing boundaries the way kids do when they're figuring out if an adult is safe. Eli began following Silas around the barn without being asked, content just to be near him. And Rose had completely decided that Silas belonged to her now. She climbed on him like he was furniture, demanded stories, fell asleep in his lap during dinner. Martha watched it all and felt her heart doing something dangerous. Then one morning in early January, she came downstairs to find Silas teaching Will how to make coffee. You measure it like this, Silas was saying, demonstrating with the tin. Too much, and it's bitter. Too little, and it's just brown water. You want it strong enough to wake you up, but not so strong it strips paint off the walls. Will nodded seriously, taking mental notes like this was the most important lesson of his life. Martha paused in the doorway, watching them. The early morning light cut through the kitchen window, turning everything gold. Silas's hand covered Will's as he helped the boy pour the grounds into the pot. Patient, gentle, nothing like the cold stranger who'd bought Rose's medicine 6 weeks ago. Something twisted in Martha's chest. She recognized the feeling and hated it. This wasn't real. This was temporary. Come spring, they'd be gone, and Silas would go back to being alone, and she'd be somewhere else trying to survive with 3 kids and no prospects. She needed to remember that. But then Silas looked up and saw her standing there, and his whole face changed, softened. Like seeing her made something in him relax. "Coffee's almost ready," he said. "I can smell it." "Will's learning. Figure it's a useful skill." "Very useful." Martha moved into the kitchen, keeping her voice light. "Especially when he has to make his own someday." The words came out sharper than she meant them to. Silas caught it. She saw his expression flicker, but he didn't say anything. Just went back to showing Will how to set the pot on the stove. After breakfast, Martha threw herself into work. She scrubbed the floors until her hands were raw, beat every rug in the house, reorganized the cellar for the 3rd time. Anything to keep her mind busy and away from thoughts she had no business thinking. She was in the middle of washing windows when Silas found her. "You're going to wear a hole in that glass," he said. Martha didn't stop scrubbing. It's dirty. It was dirty an hour ago when you started. Now it's clean. You're just pushing the same rag in circles." He was right. Martha set down the rag and stepped back. Her reflection looked tired in the glass. "Is something wrong?" Silas asked. "No." "You're lying. I'm fine." "Martha." He moved closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. "What's going on?" She wanted to tell him, wanted to say that she was scared of getting used to this, scared of letting her children get attached, scared of what would happen when spring came and they had to leave. And Will cried because he'd found a father figure and lost him all in the span of a few months. But saying it out loud would make it real. So instead, she said, "I'm just tired." Silas studied her face. She could see him trying to decide whether to push or let it go. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but if you need to talk, I know where to find you." He left. Martha went back to the windows even though they didn't need it. That night at dinner, Rose announced that she wanted a birthday party. "Your birthday's not until April," Martha said. "I know, but I've never had a real party. Just the family. And now we have Silas, so it's like having more family, except we're not really family because we're just staying until spring, but maybe if I have a party it'll feel more like family." "Rose, breathe," the little girl sucked in air. "Can I have a party?" Martha looked at Silas. He was very deliberately focused on his plate. "We'll see," Martha said, which was what you said when you meant no but didn't want to fight about it. Rose deflated. "That means no. It means we'll see." After the children went to bed, Martha found Silas in the barn. He was brushing down one of the horses, slow, methodical strokes that the animal clearly enjoyed. "She just wants to feel like she belongs somewhere," Martha said without preamble. Silas didn't stop brushing. "I know. We can't give her that, not permanently." "I know that too." "Do you?" Martha moved closer. "Because you're acting like this is something that could last. Teaching Will to make coffee, carving with Eli, letting Rose climb all over you. You're getting attached. So are you." The words hit like a slap. Martha opened her mouth to deny it. But nothing came out. "I see the way you look at this place now," Silas continued quietly. "Like it's home. Like you're not just working here, but building something. And I see the way you look at me sometimes, and it scares the hell out of me because I'm looking at you the same way." Martha's heart was pounding. "Silas." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm not expecting anything. I know this is temporary. I know you've got your own life to figure out, but I need you to understand that I'm already attached. Have been since you walked into that general store looking half dead and still refused to beg. So if you're worried about me getting hurt when you leave." He finally looked at her. "It's too late. That ship sailed weeks ago." Martha didn't know what to say. Her throat felt too tight. "But that's my problem," Silas continued. "Not yours. You do what you need to do for your children. That comes first, always." He went back to brushing the horse. Subject closed. Martha stood there in the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and animals and winter, and felt something inside her chest crack wide open. She'd spent 3 months keeping herself together through sheer force of will. 3 months refusing to feel anything except the bare minimum required to keep moving. 3 months being strong because her children needed her to be strong. But standing here, watching this broken man try to protect her from his own feelings while simultaneously admitting he was already in too deep, the tears came before she could stop them. Silas heard her make a sound and turned. His eyes went wide. Martha. "I'm fine," she choked out. "I'm fine. You're crying." "I know I'm crying. I have eyes." He set down the brush and moved toward her, hesitated, like he wanted to touch her but didn't know if he was allowed. Martha made the decision for him. She stepped forward and pressed her face against his chest and let herself fall apart. Silas's arms came around her immediately, tight, solid, like he was trying to hold all her broken pieces together through sheer physical pressure. Martha cried for Samuel, for the life she'd lost, for the terror of the past 3 months and the uncertainty of the future. For Rose, who wanted a birthday party, and Will, who needed a father, and Eli, who was finally starting to heal. For herself, because she was so damn tired of being strong all the time. And for Silas, because he'd been alone for 8 years and was probably going to be alone again, and she hated that she couldn't fix it. When the crying finally stopped, she pulled back and wiped her face with her sleeve. "Sorry," she muttered. "Don't be. I got your shirt wet. I have other shirts." They stood there, neither quite willing to step away. Silas's hands were still on her shoulders. Martha could feel the warmth of them through her dress. "I don't know what to do," she admitted quietly. "About any of this. Neither do I." "That's not helpful." "I know." His thumb moved in small circles on her shoulder, probably unconscious, but it made her skin prickle with awareness. "But it's the truth. I don't have answers, Martha. I barely know what the questions are." "The question is what happens in spring." "Yeah, that's the question. And we don't have an answer." "Not yet." Martha looked up at him. His face was very close. She could count the gray hairs at his temples if she wanted to, could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. "Silas," she said, "what do you want to happen?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very carefully, "I want you to stay." Her breath caught. "But I know that's not fair," he continued. "You've got your own plans, your own life. I can't ask you to give that up just because a lonely rancher got used to having people around again." "What if I don't have other plans?" "Then you should make some. You're smart, capable. You could find work in any town between here and California. You could—" "What if I don't want to?" Silas stared at her. "Martha, what if I wanted to stay? What would that look like?" She watched him struggle with the question, watched hope and fear war across his face. "It would look like this, he said finally. "You running the house, me running the ranch, the children growing up here. It would look like a partnership." "Just a partnership?" His jaw tightened. "What else would it be?" Good question. Martha didn't know how to answer it. She'd been married before. She knew what it meant to share a life with someone. But this, whatever this was with Silas, felt different, rawer, less certain. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it feels like something." "Yeah," Silas said quietly. "It does." They stood there in the barn while the horses shifted in their stalls and the wind howled outside. Two people who'd lost everything trying to figure out if they could build something new from the wreckage. Finally, Martha stepped back. Silas's hands fell away. "We should probably go inside," she said. "It's late." "Yeah." They walked back to the house in silence. At the door, Silas paused. "Martha? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me with—" He gestured vaguely. "All of it. You trusted me first. With your home, your ranch, your life. Maybe we're both idiots. Maybe." He smiled. Small, but real. Then he went inside. Martha stood on the porch for a moment longer, looking up at the stars scattered across the winter sky. Somewhere out there was the life she'd planned, the safe choices, the smart decisions. But standing here felt right in a way nothing had felt right since Samuel died. She went inside. 2 weeks later, Martha was kneading bread dough when she heard horses in the yard. She looked out the window and froze. 2 riders, well-dressed, expensive horses. They didn't look like ranchers or townsfolk. They looked like money. And money, in Martha's experience, usually meant trouble. Silas appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. The riders dismounted. Even from here, Martha could see the tension in Silas's shoulders. She moved to the door and opened it just enough to hear.
Can
I help you? Silas was saying. We're looking for Martha Hale. The speaker was a man in his 50s, with silver hair and a coat that probably cost more than Martha made in a year. We were told she might be working here. Martha's stomach dropped. Who's asking? Silas said. My name is Theodore Blackwell. This is my wife, Margaret. We've come from St. Louis. It's a matter of some urgency regarding Mrs. Hale's family. Family. The word sent ice through Martha's veins. She pushed the door open and stepped onto the porch. I'm Martha Hale. The Blackwells turned to look at her. Margaret was younger than her husband, maybe 40, with a face that might have been kind under different circumstances. Right now, it was set in determined lines. Mrs. Hale, Theodore said, we need to speak with you. It's about your daughter Rose. Every protective instinct Martha had screamed to life. What about her? Perhaps we should discuss this inside. You can discuss it right here. Theodore exchanged a glance with his wife. Then he said very carefully, we have reason to believe that Rose is not your biological daughter, that she was in fact adopted by your late husband Samuel Hale before you were married. The world tilted sideways. Martha heard the words, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. You're wrong, she said. I'm afraid we're not. We have documentation, birth records, adoption papers. Theodore pulled a leather folder from his coat. Rose's birth mother was Margaret's younger sister, Catherine. She died in childbirth. Samuel Hale was working in St. Louis at the time, and for reasons we still don't understand, he took custody of the child. We only recently discovered this through Catherine's estate records. Martha's mind was racing. She thought about Rose, about the little girl she'd raised for 6 years, about how Samuel had always said Rose looked like his grandmother, about how he'd deflected questions about the pregnancy, about how there were no pictures from that time. No, this was wrong. This was, even if that were true, Martha said, forcing the words out steady. Rose is my daughter. I've raised her since she was a baby. She's mine. Legally, that's complicated, Theodore said. The adoption was never finalized properly. Samuel died before completing the paperwork, which means Rose is technically still a ward of Catherine's estate, and as her only living relatives, we have a claim. The air left Martha's lungs. Silas stepped forward. You need to leave. Mr. Granger, now. We have every right to discuss this matter. Not on my property, you don't. You've said your piece. Now get out. Theodore's expression hardened. Mrs. Hale, we're not trying to be cruel, but Rose deserves to be raised by family. We can provide her with opportunities you simply cannot. Education, society, a proper home. She has a home, Martha said. Her voice came out like broken glass. She has a family. She has me. You're living on a remote ranch with a man you're not married to, Margaret said quietly. You're working as hired help. Is that really the life you want for her? Better than being raised by strangers. We're not strangers. We're her blood. Blood doesn't mean anything. Martha's voice cracked. I'm the one who sat up with her when she was sick. I'm the one who taught her to read. I'm the one she calls Mama. You can't just show up and take her because of some piece of paper. Actually, Theodore said, we can. The law is very clear on this matter. We've already spoken with a judge in Silver Ridge. He agrees that our claim is valid. The world was ending. Martha could feel it crumbling around her. No, she whispered. No, you can't. We're not monsters, Mrs. Hale. We're willing to give you time to say goodbye. But Rose will be coming with us. It's already been decided. Silas moved fast, faster than Martha had ever seen him move. He grabbed Theodore by the front of his expensive coat and lifted him half off the ground. Listen to me very carefully, Silas said. His voice was deadly quiet. You're going to get back on your horse and ride out of here. And if you ever come back, I will make you regret it. Understood? Are you threatening me? I'm making a promise. Margaret's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Granger, we understand you care about these people, but the law is the law. We have documentation. We have a judge's preliminary ruling. This will happen whether you threaten us or not. Silas set Theodore down but didn't step back. Then I guess we'll see you in court. You'll lose. Maybe. But we'll fight anyway. The Blackwells exchanged another glance. Then Theodore straightened his coat. We'll be staying at the hotel in Silver Ridge, he said. Our lawyer will contact you with the hearing date. I suggest you retain legal counsel, Mrs. Hale, though I doubt it will make a difference. They mounted their horses and rode away. Martha stood on the porch and watched them go. She couldn't feel her legs, couldn't feel anything except a roaring in her ears that might have been her heart or might have been the sound of her entire world collapsing. Silas's hand found hers. Martha, they're going to take her. The words came out flat, dead. They're going to take my baby. No, they're not. You heard them. They have the law on their side. They have money. They don't have you. Martha turned to look at him. That's not enough. The hell it isn't. Silas's jaw was set. You've survived everything life threw at you. You crossed half the country with 3 starving children. You fought through a blizzard. You're the strongest person I've ever met. If you think I'm going to let you give up now, I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. The law doesn't care how strong I am. The law cares about blood and money and paperwork, and I don't have any of those things. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. Martha pulled her hand free. You don't understand. You can't. I understand perfectly. I understand that they're trying to take your child. I understand that you're terrified. And I understand that you feel helpless. But you're not alone in this. Not anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow. Martha stared at him. Why are you helping me? She asked. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. You live in my house. You eat at my table. Those children, his voice caught. They've become part of my life. Rose asks me questions every damn day until I want to pull my hair out. Eli follows me around the barn like a puppy. Will looks at me like I hung the moon. You think I'm going to stand by and let someone tear this family apart? We're not your family. Aren't you? The question hung in the air between them. Martha wanted to say no. Wanted to maintain the wall she'd been building. Wanted to protect herself from the inevitable pain of loss. But standing here, looking at this man who'd let 4 strangers into his life and his home and his heart despite 8 years of self-imposed isolation, I don't know, she whispered. Silas stepped closer. Well, I do. And I'll be damned if I let those people take Rose without a fight. How? What can we possibly do? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. He paused. Together. Martha felt something break inside her chest. Not in a bad way, more like something that had been locked tight finally cracking open. Okay, she said. Together. That night, Martha sat on Rose's bed and watched her daughter sleep. The little girl was curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, completely unaware that 2 strangers wanted to take her away. Martha's throat ached. 6 years. She'd been Rose's mother for 6 years. She'd been there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every nightmare. She knew that Rose hated carrots but loved peas, that she was afraid of spiders but fascinated by snakes, that she sang to herself when she thought no one was listening. How could anyone think she didn't belong to Martha? But even as she thought it, a part of her mind whispered the truth she'd been avoiding. Rose wasn't hers, not really, not by blood. Samuel had lied to her. For 6 years he'd lied. Let her believe Rose was their biological child when all along he'd adopted her from a dead woman Martha had never even heard of. Why? Why would he do that? Martha thought about the man she'd married. Kind, gentle, terrible with money, always trying to do the right thing even when the right thing made no sense. He'd probably thought he was protecting her. Thought it would be easier if she never knew. Thought, it didn't matter what he thought. He was dead and she was here and the Blackwells wanted to take Rose and none of Samuel's reasons mattered anymore. A sound at the door made Martha turn. Silas stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of something that smelled like whiskey. Thought you could use this, he said quietly. Martha took the cup, drank. The liquor burned going down. Where'd you get whiskey? Been saving it. For emergencies? He leaned against the doorframe. This qualifies. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Rose sleep. She looks so peaceful, Martha said, like nothing bad could ever touch her. Kids are good at that. I don't know how to tell her that people want to take her away, that her whole life might have been a lie. Don't tell her yet, Silas said. Not until we know more. No point scaring her if we can still fix this. Can we fix it? I don't know, but I'm going to try like hell. Martha looked at him. Why? And don't say it's because we're family. We barely know each other. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, 8 years ago, when Clara died, I made a choice. I decided it was easier to feel nothing than to risk feeling that kind of pain again. So I closed myself off, stopped caring, stopped trying, just existed. Ba si pachish squachim bam. He paused. And then you showed up with your half-frozen children and your stubborn pride, and you made me feel things again, made this place feel alive. For the first time in 8 years, I wake up and there's a reason to get out of bed beyond basic survival. Silas, I'm not done. He met her eyes. Maybe we're not family in the traditional sense. Maybe this whole thing is temporary, and you'll leave in spring and I'll go back to being alone. But right now, in this moment, you matter to me, all of you. And I'll fight for the things that matter, even if it's a fight I'm going to lose. Martha's vision blurred. She blinked hard. You're a good man, she said. I'm really not. But I'm trying to be. You make me want to try. They finished their drinks in silence. Eventually, Silas pushed off the doorframe. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we ride into town and find a lawyer. And then we figure out how to keep your daughter. Our daughter, Martha said before she could stop herself. Silas went very still. What? If we're doing this, if we're fighting this together, then she's not just mine anymore. She's ours. Something shifted in Silas's expression. Something that looked like hope mixed with terror. Yeah, he said quietly. Ours. He left. Martha climbed into bed next to Rose and pulled her daughter close. The little girl stirred but didn't wake. Martha lay there in the darkness and tried to imagine a world where she lost this child. Tried to picture Rose growing up in some eastern city with strangers who shared her blood but not her heart. She couldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. The Blackwells wanted a fight? Fine. They'd get one. But they'd better be ready for what happened when you backed a mother into a corner and tried to take her child. Because Martha Hale had survived poverty, widowhood, frontier winters, and 3 months of running with nowhere to go. She'd be damned if she let some rich strangers destroy the family she'd fought so hard to keep alive. Outside, the wind howled. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. But inside the ranch house, wrapped around her sleeping daughter, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt ready to fight. Martha woke before dawn with a plan she didn't fully believe in and a determination that bordered on reckless. She left Rose sleeping and went downstairs to find Silas already in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee like it held answers. We're getting married, Martha said. Silas looked up, blinked. What? You and me, we're getting married, today, if possible. Martha, listen to me. She moved closer, her words coming fast. The Blackwells said, I'm living with a man I'm not married to, that it's an improper environment for children. Fine. We fix that. We get married, and suddenly their whole argument falls apart. Silas set down his coffee very carefully. You want to get married to win a court case. I want to get married to keep my daughter. There's a difference. Is there? Martha felt something twist in her chest, but she pushed it down. Does it matter? It solves the problem. And what happens after? When the case is over and the Blackwells are gone? We just stay married because it was convenient? I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? Yeah, Martha. It matters. Silas stood up. Marriage isn't something you do just to win an argument. He stopped, struggling for words. It's supposed to mean something. It does mean something. It means I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect my children, even if that means tying myself legally to a man I've known for 2 months. The words came out harder than she intended. She saw Silas flinch. That's what I am to you? He said quietly. A legal convenience? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Martha opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't know how to explain that marriage terrified her almost as much as losing Rose, that the thought of tying herself to another person after watching Samuel die made her want to run, that Silas had somehow become important to her in ways she wasn't ready to examine, and that scared her more than the Blackwells and their lawyers combined. "I meant," she said finally, "that I need help. And you offered it. This is me taking you up on that offer." Silas studied her face for a long moment. Then he said, "No." Martha felt like he'd slapped her. "What?" "I said no. I'm not marrying you just to help you win a custody case." "But you said—" "I said I'd fight for you, and I will, but not like this." He moved around the table, stopping a few feet away from her. "When I get married again. If I get married again, it's going to be because I love someone and they love me back, not because it's legally convenient. I did the real thing once. I'm not settling for a fake version just to satisfy a judge." Martha felt anger flare hot in her chest. "So you're just going to let them take Rose?" "That's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying there has to be another way, a way that doesn't involve us making promises we don't mean." "Who says I don't mean them?" The question hung in the air between them. Silas went very still. "Do you?" he asked. Martha's heart was pounding. She wanted to say yes, wanted to mean it, but the truth was, she didn't know. She cared about Silas more than she wanted to admit, but love? Marriage? Those were words that came with weight she wasn't sure she could carry. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but does it matter? If it keeps Rose safe, it matters to me." Silas's voice was rough. "I buried one wife, watched her die slow while I stood there useless. When she was gone, I swore I'd never put myself through that again. Never love someone that much. Never risk that kind of pain." He paused. "And then you showed up and made me break that promise to myself. So yeah, Martha, it matters whether you mean it, because I'm already in too deep to pretend this is just business." The air left Martha's lungs. Before she could respond, footsteps on the stairs announced Will's arrival. The boy stopped in the doorway, looking between them with worried eyes. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," Martha said automatically. "We were just discussing plans for today." "What kind of plans?" "We're riding into town," Silas said. His voice was carefully neutral now, all the emotion locked away. "Going to talk to a lawyer about the situation with Rose." Will's face darkened. "I heard those people yesterday, through the window. They can't really take her, can they?" Martha wanted to lie. Wanted to promise everything would be fine, but Will was 10 years old and had already seen too much of life's ugliness to believe comfortable fiction. "They're going to try," she said. "That's why we need a lawyer, someone who knows the law better than we do." "Can I come?" "No. You need to stay here with Eli and Rose. Keep things normal. Don't tell Rose what's happening, not yet. She doesn't need that worry." Will nodded, but his jaw was set in that stubborn way that reminded Martha of Samuel. "If they try to take her, I won't let them." I mean it, Ma. They'll have to go through me first." Silas put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "That's good loyalty. But we're going to handle this the legal way. Fighting only makes things worse. Sometimes fighting is the only option." "Sometimes, but not yet." Silas squeezed Will's shoulder. "Trust me on this." They rode into Silver Ridge an hour later. The town looked the same as it had 2 months ago when Martha first arrived. Cold, windswept, indifferent. But now it felt different. Now it felt like enemy territory. The lawyer's office was above the general store. Garrett saw them come in and gave Martha a sympathetic look that made her stomach turn. Everyone probably knew by now. Small towns were like that. News traveled faster than disease. The lawyer was a thin man named Harrison Webb with ink-stained fingers and tired eyes. He listened to Martha's story without interrupting, making notes on a piece of paper. When she finished, he set down his pen. "Mrs. Hale, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a case I'd recommend fighting." Martha's heart sank. "Why not?" "Because legally speaking, the Blackwells have a strong claim. If what they say is true, that Rose was never properly adopted by your late husband, then she's technically still a ward of her biological mother's estate. Blood relations have priority in these situations, especially when those blood relations have the means to provide for the child. I can provide for her. Can you?" Webb looked at her over his spectacles. You're a widow working as hired help on an isolated ranch. No permanent residence, no independent income. The Blackwells can offer education, society, opportunity. A judge is going to see that and ask himself what's in the child's best interest. Her best interest is staying with her mother, Martha said. You're not her mother, not legally. The words hit like a physical blow. Silas leaned forward. So what are you saying? That we should just give up? I'm saying you should be realistic about your chances. The Blackwells have money, connections, and the law on their side. You have, he gestured vaguely, good intentions. That's it? Martha's voice shook. That's your legal advice? Give up? I'm advising you to consider what's truly best for the child. Perhaps the Blackwells would allow visitation. Martha stood up so fast her chair fell over. I didn't come here to be told to surrender my daughter to strangers. I came here for help. Mrs. Hale, how much? Silas interrupted. Webb blinked. I'm sorry? How much to take the case anyway, even if we're going to lose? Mr. Granger, I don't think you understand I understand fine. You think it's hopeless. Maybe it is. But we're fighting anyway, so how much? Webb sighed. My retainer is $50, plus expenses. But I really must advise. Silas pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted out $50 in bills and coins. He set them on the desk. There's your retainer. We'll cover expenses as they come. When's the hearing? Webb looked at the money, then at Silas, then at Martha, who was still standing with her fists clenched. 2 weeks, he said finally. Judge Ward is coming through on his circuit. He'll hear the case then. He picked up his pen again. I'll need to prepare. Gather character witnesses. Build a case for why Rose should stay with you despite the legal complications. We can do that, Martha said. Can you? Because the Blackwells are going to paint you as unstable, desperate, morally questionable for living with a man you're not married to. They're going to use everything against you. Let them try. Webb studied her for a moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, but close to it. All right, Mrs. Hale, we'll fight. But you need to understand something. This isn't about what's fair or right. It's about what we can prove in court. Emotion won't win this case. Strategy will. Then we'll be strategic, Silas said. They left the office and stood on the street outside. Martha felt hollowed out, empty. 2 weeks, she said. We can do a lot in 2 weeks. Can we? Because that lawyer didn't seem to think so. Webb's a pessimist. Probably seen too many cases go bad. Silas looked at her. But he's right about one thing. We need character witnesses. People who can testify that you're a good mother and Rose belongs with you. Who? I've been here 2 months. I barely know anyone. You know Garrett, Doc Morrison, the pastor, the hotel woman. What's her name? Mrs. Chen, who threw us out into the cold our first night here. Maybe she's changed her mind since then. Martha doubted it, but she didn't argue. They spent the rest of the day going door to door, asking people they barely knew to vouch for Martha's character in court. Garrett agreed immediately. That little girl belongs with you. Anyone with eyes can see that. Doc Morrison was more hesitant. I'll testify to Rose's health and that you've been taking proper care of her, but I can't speak to the legal questions. The pastor, a round man named Father Sullivan, offered prayers but no testimony. I make it a policy not to involve myself in legal matters, but I'll pray for a just outcome. Mrs. Chen listened to their request, then shook her head. I'm sorry, but I can't lie under oath. The truth is you showed up here with nothing and you're still living on charity. That's not going to help your case. By the end of the day, they had 2 solid witnesses and a handful of maybes. It wasn't enough. Martha knew it wasn't enough. They rode back to the ranch in silence. The sun was setting, turning the snow orange and gold. Beautiful in a way that made Martha want to scream. When they reached the house, Rose came running out to meet them. Ma, Silas, you're back. I made biscuits with Will, but I think we put too much salt in them because Eli made a face and spit his out. She grabbed Martha's hand. Come see, they're terrible, but we ate them anyway. Martha looked down at her daughter's eager face and felt something crack inside her chest. This child. This perfect, chattering, impossible child who asked too many questions and climbed on furniture and brought joy into every room she entered. How could anyone think she belonged anywhere except right here? That night after the children were asleep, Martha found Silas in the barn. He was sitting on a hay bale, staring at nothing. "We're going to lose," she said. He didn't contradict her. Martha sat down beside him. "I keep trying to think of a way to win. Some argument or strategy or magic word that'll make the judge see reason. But there isn't one, is there?" "I don't know." Webb was right. "I can't compete with what the Blackwells can offer. I'm just a widow with no money and no prospects. Why would any judge choose me over them?" "Because you're her mother." "Not legally." "Legally doesn't mean shit." Silas turned to look at her. "You're the one who sat up with her when she was sick. You're the one who taught her to read. You're the one she runs to when she's scared. That makes you her mother. The rest is just paperwork." "The rest is what the judge cares about." "Then we make him care about more than paperwork." "How?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we did get married?" Martha's breath caught. "You said you wouldn't—" "I said I wouldn't marry you just to win a case. I didn't say I wouldn't marry you at all. Silas, hear me out." He shifted to face her fully. "I've been thinking about this all day. About what Webb said. About the Blackwells' argument. About what we can do to fight back." He paused. "And I keep coming back to the same conclusion. We need to show that judge a stable home, a real family. Not a widow and hired hand living under the same roof, but a married couple raising children together. That's exactly what I suggested this morning. This morning you wanted to get married as a strategy. I'm talking about something different." His eyes held hers. "I'm talking about getting married because I care about you. Because I care about Rose and Will and Eli. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, you stopped being strangers living in my house and started being the family I thought I'd lost forever." Martha's throat was too tight to speak. "I'm not asking you to love me," Silas continued. "I'm not even asking you to stay after the case is over, if that's not what you want. But I'm asking you to marry me. For real. Not as a legal trick, but as a partnership. A commitment to facing whatever comes next together." "You don't know what you're asking?" "I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to take a chance on a broken-down rancher who spent 8 years hiding from life. I'm asking you to trust that maybe we can build something real out of all this mess. And I'm asking you to let me stand beside you in that courtroom and tell that judge that Rose has a family, a real one, the kind that's built on choice instead of just blood." Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes. "What if we lose anyway?" "Then we lose. But at least we lose together. And after? What happens when the dust settles and we're legally married and we have to figure out what that actually means?" "I don't know. We figure it out as we go." He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm, solid. "Martha, I'm not going to lie and say this is simple. It's not. It's complicated and messy and probably crazy. But I'd rather have complicated and messy with you than safe and alone without you." Martha looked at their joined hands, thought about Samuel, who she'd loved in an easy, uncomplicated way. Thought about the life she'd planned and the life she'd ended up living. Thought about this ranch and this man and these children who'd somehow become hers. "Okay," she said. Silas blinked. "Okay?" "Okay, I'll marry you. For real. Not just as strategy, but as whatever this is between us. Partnership, family, a chance at something good." "You mean it?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it." A smile broke across Silas's face. Genuine, unguarded, bright enough to hurt. Then he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't Martha's first kiss, but it felt like it. Felt new and terrifying and right in ways she hadn't expected. Silas's hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the roughness of his palm. Martha's fingers curled into his shirt, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably tell the children," he said. "Probably. And Webb, so he can factor it into the case." "Yeah." Neither of them moved. "Martha?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you crashed into my life." She laughed, a startled, genuine sound. "I didn't crash. I walked into a general store and asked for work." Same thing. They sat there in the barn, holding hands like teenagers, while the horses shifted in their stalls and the wind howled outside. Two broken people who'd somehow found each other in the middle of a Wyoming winter. They told the children the next morning at breakfast. Rose immediately started planning the wedding. Can I have a new dress? Can we have cake? Can I hold flowers? We're keeping it simple, Martha said. Just a quick ceremony at the church. Nothing fancy. But Rose. Will was watching Silas with careful eyes. So you're going to be our father now? Silas hesitated. Martha held her breath. I'm going to try to be, Silas said finally. If that's all right with you. Will thought about it. Then he nodded. Yeah, that's all right. Eli didn't say anything, just went back to his breakfast. But Martha saw the small smile on his face. They were married 3 days later in the Silver Ridge Church. Pastor Sullivan performed the ceremony with obvious reluctance. He'd made it clear he thought they were rushing into things, but he did it. Martha wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much. Silas wore clean clothes and looked uncomfortable. The children stood as witnesses. Garrett and Doc Morrison came to show support. The ceremony was short, basic. No music, no flowers, no celebration. Just two people making promises in front of a handful of witnesses. When Sullivan said, "You may kiss the bride," Silas leaned down and pressed his lips to Martha's. Brief, chaste. But his hand squeezed hers hard enough to hurt. Afterward, Garrett shook Silas's hand. Never thought I'd see you married again. Makes two of us. Doc Morrison pulled Martha aside. You know what you're doing? Not really, but I'm doing it anyway. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. They rode back to the ranch as a married couple. The children chattered in the back of the wagon. Silas drove in silence, but his hand found Martha's and held on tight. That night, after the children were asleep, they stood in the hallway outside the master bedroom. I can sleep in one of the other rooms, Silas said, if you want. Martha thought about it. Thought about propriety and what was expected and how strange this all was. Then she thought about facing the Blackwells and the judge and whatever came next, about doing it alone versus doing it together. No, she said. We're married. We should try to make this real. They went into the bedroom together. Martha's hands shook as she undressed. This was different from Samuel. This was choosing instead of just following the expected path. Silas was careful with her, gentle, like he was afraid she might break or run. Afterward, lying in the darkness with her head on his chest, Martha listened to his heartbeat and tried to figure out what she was feeling. Fear, definitely. This was all moving so fast, too fast, but also something else. Something that felt like relief, like she'd been carrying a weight alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to share the burden. You okay? Silas asked quietly. I don't know. That's fair. Are you okay? Same answer. Martha almost laughed. We're a mess, aren't we? Yeah, but at least we're a mess together. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. Webb spent the intervening days preparing their case. He interviewed Martha for hours, building a timeline of her life with Rose. He talked to the witnesses. He prepared questions and strategies and contingency plans. But every time Martha asked if he thought they could win, he gave the same answer. I don't know. It depends on the judge. The Blackwells' lawyer was a sharp-faced man named Vincent Cross, who looked at Martha like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. He filed motion after motion, each one designed to undermine her claim. Motion to prove Rose's adoption was invalid. Granted. Motion to question Martha's fitness as a parent. Granted. Motion to introduce evidence of her financial instability. Granted. By the time the hearing actually arrived, Martha felt like she'd already lost. The courthouse was a small building on the edge of town. Judge Nathaniel Ward was an older man with white hair and eyes that gave nothing away. He listened to both sides present their opening arguments without visible reaction. Cross went first. He painted a picture of Martha as a desperate woman who'd dragged her children across the country with no plan and no resources. He emphasized her poverty, her reliance on Silas's charity, her failure to provide stable housing. And now, Cross said, she's married this man in what can only be described as a transparent attempt to appear more respectable in the eyes of this court. A marriage of convenience, nothing more. A legal strategy disguised as commitment. Martha's hands clenched in her lap. Beside her, Silas went rigid. Webb stood for his turn. He spoke about maternal bonds and what it meant to be a parent, about the years Martha had spent raising Rose, about the love and devotion she'd shown. But even to Martha's ears, it sounded weak, emotional instead of legal. Exactly what Webb had said wouldn't win the case. Then the witnesses started. Garrett testified that Martha had arrived in Silver Ridge half frozen and still refused to beg, that she'd asked for work instead of charity, that she'd shown strength and dignity even at her lowest point. Doc Morrison testified that Rose was healthy and well cared for, that Martha had brought her in immediately when she was sick, that she'd shown proper maternal concern. Cross tore them both apart on cross-examination, pointed out that they'd known Martha for less than 3 months, that their testimony was based on impression rather than fact, that good intentions didn't make someone a fit parent. Then Will took the stand. Martha had argued against it. Will was only 10, too young to be put through this, but he'd insisted, and Webb had agreed that his testimony might carry weight. Will sat in the witness chair and looked at the judge with serious eyes. "Tell me about your life with Mrs. Hale," Webb said gently. "Your mother?" "She's the strongest person I know," Will said. His voice was steady. "After Pa died, we had nothing. The bank took our house. Everyone told Ma to give up, to let us go to an orphanage or split us up or whatever. But she didn't. She kept us together, kept us alive. We walked through snow and slept in barns and went hungry more nights than I can count. But we stayed together because Ma wouldn't let us be separated." "And your sister Rose?" "Rose is my sister. I don't care what some paper says. She's my sister and Ma's her mother, and anyone who tries to say different doesn't know what they're talking about." Cross stood for cross-examination. "Young man, do you understand that the Blackwells can give Rose opportunities your mother cannot? Education, culture, a better life?" "Rose has a good life," Will said. "She has people who love her. That's better than any amount of money." "You're 10 years old. You can't possibly understand." "I understand that Ma walked 4 miles through a blizzard carrying Rose when she was too sick to walk herself. I understand that Ma went hungry so we could eat. I understand that Ma gave up everything to keep us safe. What do the Blackwells understand except that they want something that doesn't belong to them?" The courtroom went silent. Cross tried to recover. "That's very touching, but the law, I don't care about the law," Will interrupted. "I care about my family." "Young man, my family," Will repeated, louder now. "Ma and Silas and Rose and Eli. That's my family. And if you try to break it apart, you're wrong. I don't care what the law says. You're wrong." Judge Ward leaned forward. "That's enough, son." Will climbed down from the witness chair. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Martha wanted to grab him and hold him and tell him how proud she was. The Blackwells testified next. They spoke about their comfortable home in St. Louis, the schools Rose could attend, the life she could have. Margaret's voice was soft when she said, "We're not trying to be cruel. We just want what's best for Catherine's daughter, our niece." "And you believe Mrs. Hale cannot provide that?" Webb asked. "I believe she's doing her best, but her best isn't enough." Then it was Martha's turn. She sat in the witness chair and tried to keep her hands from shaking. Webb asked her about Rose, about their life together, about the journey west and the decision to accept Silas's offer and everything that had happened since. Martha answered as honestly as she could. Yes, she was poor. Yes, the ranch was isolated. Yes, she'd married Silas partly to strengthen her case. "But I also married him because I love him," she said. "And because he's become a father to my children in ways that matter more than blood. Because family isn't about who you're related to. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who stays." Cross stood for his cross-examination with a predatory smile. "Mrs. Hale, let's talk about your late husband, Samuel. How long were you married?" 7 years. "And in those 7 years, did he ever tell you Rose was adopted?" Martha's throat tightened. "No." "So he lied to you for years, let you believe the child was yours biologically when she wasn't." "He protected me. He lied. Yes or no?" "Yes," Martha whispered. "And now you want this court to trust your judgment when you didn't even know the truth about your own family?" "I knew Rose was my daughter." "Ah, she's not your daughter. She's Catherine Blackwell's daughter. That's a biological fact. And the fact that you've convinced yourself otherwise doesn't change reality." The reality, Martha said, her voice shaking with anger now, is that I'm the one who raised her. I'm the one she calls Mama. I'm the one who knows she's afraid of thunder and loves stories about dragons and wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. What do you know about her except what you read in some file? I know the law. The law doesn't know my daughter. I do. Cross opened his mouth to continue, but Judge Ward held up a hand. That's enough. I've heard what I need to hear. He looked at both tables. I'll take this under advisement and deliver my ruling tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Martha sat frozen in her chair. Tomorrow. The judge would decide tomorrow. Silas's hand found hers and, come on, let's go home. They rode back to the ranch in silence. The children could sense something was wrong. They were quieter than usual, watching Martha with worried eyes. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Silas and stared at the ceiling. What if we lose? She whispered. Then we figure out what comes next. What if there is no next? What if they take her and that's it? What if I never see her again? Silas pulled her close. Then we fight harder. Appeal. Do whatever it takes. With what money? We already spent everything on Webb. We'll find more. Sell cattle, sell the ranch if we have to. Silas, I mean it. That little girl is part of this family now. I'll burn everything I own before I let strangers take her. Martha pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry. Big, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Silas held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring things that might have been comfort or might have been prayers. When the crying finally stopped, Martha pulled back and looked at him. I love you, she said. Silas went very still. What? I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe during the blizzard. Maybe when you paid for Rose's medicine. Maybe 100 small moments in between, but I love you, and I needed you to know that before tomorrow. In case everything falls apart. Martha, I know I'm not easy. I know I'm stubborn and proud, and I don't always say the right things. But you make me want to try. You make me believe good things can still happen even after everything's gone to hell, and I love you for that. Silas kissed her, deep and desperate and full of things he couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, I love you too. Have for weeks. Probably since you told me off for trying to skip lunch. Martha laughed, a watery, broken sound. That's a weird moment to fall in love. You were standing in my barn telling me I had to eat whether I liked it or not. Like you had every right to boss me around in my own home. And I realized I wanted you to. Wanted someone who cared enough to fight with me, to push back, to make me remember what it felt like to be alive. They held each other in the darkness and tried not to think about tomorrow, about judges and lawyers and decisions that would tear their family apart. But morning came anyway. They rode into town together, Martha, Silas, and all three children. Will had insisted on coming. If they're going to take Rose, I want to be there. Martha hadn't had the heart to say no. The courthouse was already full when they arrived. Half the town had shown up to watch. Martha felt their eyes on her as she walked to her table. Judge Ward entered. Everyone stood. Be seated, he said. The room sat. Ward shuffled some papers, looked up. His expression gave nothing away. I've considered both arguments carefully. This is not an easy decision. Both parties clearly care about the child's welfare, even if they disagree on what that welfare looks like. He paused. However, the law is clear on certain matters. Blood relations have priority in custody cases, especially when those relations can demonstrate the means to provide for the child's needs. Martha's world started to crumble. That being said, Ward continued, the law also recognizes that a child's best interest goes beyond financial considerations. It includes emotional bonds, stability, and the love of those who have raised her. Hope flickered. Small, but there. In this case, I'm faced with two competing truths. On one hand, Rose Hale is biologically related to the Blackwells. On the other hand, she has been raised for 6 years by Martha Hale, who has demonstrated consistent care and devotion despite significant hardship. Ward looked at Martha, then at the Blackwells, then back at his papers. My ruling is as follows. Custody of Rose Hale will remain with Martha and Silas Granger. The adoption that Samuel Hale began will be completed retroactively, with Martha Granger listed as Rose's legal mother. Martha couldn't breathe. However, Ward continued, I am granting the Blackwells visitation rights. Once per year, they may visit Rose for a period not to exceed 2 weeks. This will ensure the child maintains connection with her biological family while preserving the maternal bond that has already been established. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Rose threw herself at Martha, and Will was hugging them both, and Eli was there too, and Silas's arms came around all of them. "We won," Rose said, not quite understanding but picking up on the emotion. "Did we win?" "Yeah, baby," Martha whispered. "We won." Across the courtroom, the Blackwells stood in stunned silence. Then Margaret started crying, not angry tears, but something that looked like grief and relief mixed together. Theodore helped her sit. When he looked up, his eyes met Martha's across the room. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Theodore nodded, small but definite. Acceptance, maybe. Or just acknowledgement that they'd both wanted what was best for Rose, even if they disagreed on what that looked like. Outside, the winter sun was shining. People congratulated them. Garrett shook Silas's hand. Doc Morrison smiled. Even Webb looked pleased despite his earlier pessimism. But all Martha could focus on was Rose's hand in hers. Still here. Still hers. They rode home as a family, complete and legal and real in ways that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. That night, after the children were asleep, Martha and Silas sat by the fire. "We did it," she said. "You did it. We did it together." Silas pulled her close. So what now? Now?" Martha thought about it. "Now we live. We raise these kids. We make this ranch work. We figure out how to be married for real instead of just on paper." "Sounds complicated." "Probably." "Think we can handle it?" Martha looked around the room, at the house that had become a home, at the life they'd built from nothing. "Yeah," she said. "I think we can." Outside, the wind howled across the Wyoming plains. But inside, surrounded by warmth and family and the promise of tomorrow, Martha finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, like it was testing whether the ground was ready for it. Martha stood on the porch watching ice melt from the eaves, listening to water drip into the barrels Silas had set out to catch it. 3 months had passed since the hearing. 3 months of learning how to be married for real instead of just legally. 3 months of watching her children settle into a life that felt less like survival and more like actual living. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. Silas still had days where he went quiet and distant, disappearing into himself the way he had for 8 years before they arrived. Martha still woke up sometimes in a panic, convinced she'd lost everything again. They fought about stupid things, how to discipline the children, whether to expand the cattle herd who forgot to close the barn door. But they also laughed, made love, built something that felt solid even when everything else was uncertain. The door opened behind her and Silas came out carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and stood beside her, their shoulders touching. "Spring's here," he said. "About damn time." You know what that means? Martha did know. Spring meant the Blackwells' first visit. Judge Ward had given them 2 weeks in April. They'd written a month ago saying they'd arrive on the 15th. Today was the 14th. "Rose is nervous," Martha said. "She's been asking questions all week. What if they don't like me? What if they try to take me anyway? What if Ma changes her mind and lets them keep me?" "What did you tell her?" "That none of those things are going to happen. That this is just a visit. That she's ours and always will be." Martha sipped her coffee. "I don't know if she believed me. She's 6. Everything feels uncertain when you're 6. She's almost 7. Birthday's next week." "You planning that party she wanted?" "Already planned. Cake, presents, the whole thing. Figure she's earned it after everything." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the mountains. In the barn, they could hear Will already starting the morning chores. The boy woke earlier every day, determined to prove himself useful. Sometimes Martha worried he was growing up too fast. Other times she was just grateful he'd found purpose. "You think this will work?" she asked quietly. "The visits?" "Don't know. Hope so." "What if Rose decides she likes them better? What if she wants to go to St. Louis after all?" Silas turned to look at her. "You really think that's going to happen?" "I think kids are unpredictable. I think people with money and education can be very persuasive. I think..." Martha stopped. I think I'm scared. Yeah, me too. Really? Martha, I spent 8 years alone because I was too scared to let anyone in. Then you showed up and made me face all that fear head on. I'm still scared every damn day. Scared you'll leave, scared something will happen to the kids, scared I'll wake up and this will all be gone. He took her hand. But I'm doing it anyway. Because the alternative, going back to being alone, that's worse than any fear. Martha squeezed his hand. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired of being a coward. The Blackwells arrived the next afternoon in a hired carriage that looked out of place against the rough Wyoming landscape. Theodore stepped down first, then helped Margaret. They looked older than Martha remembered, or maybe just tired from the journey. Rose was hiding behind Martha's skirts, peeking out with huge eyes. Hello, Rose, Margaret said softly. Do you remember us? Rose shook her head. That's all right. We're your Aunt Margaret and Uncle Theodore. We knew your birth mother, your mother Catherine. She was my sister. I already have a mother, Rose said. Right here. I know you do, sweetheart. We're not trying to replace her. We just want to get to know you. Martha felt her throat tighten. Margaret's voice was gentle, kind, not the demanding tone Martha had feared. Why don't you come inside, Silas said. I'll get your bags. They set the Blackwells up in one of the spare bedrooms. Margaret looked around the house with careful eyes, taking in the clean floors, the organized shelves, the children's drawings pinned to the kitchen wall. It's lovely, she said. Very warm. It wasn't always, Silas said. Martha fixed it up. I can tell. Margaret's gaze lingered on a particular drawing, Rose's attempt at sketching the ranch with everyone labeled in messy handwriting. M.A. Silas. Us, Will, Eli, me. Over dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut. Will watched the Blackwells with suspicious eyes. Eli focused on his food. Rose chattered nervously, filling every silence with words that didn't quite make sense. Finally, Theodore set down his fork. Mrs. Granger, Martha, I owe you an apology. Martha blinked. What? When we first came here, we were convinced we were doing the right thing, convinced Rose deserved better than what you could provide. But watching you in that courtroom, listening to your son defend you, he paused. We were wrong. Not about wanting what's best for Rose, but about thinking we knew what that was better than you did. Oh, Martha said. She didn't know what else to say. We'd still like to have a relationship with her, Margaret added quickly. If you'll allow it, not as replacement parents, but as family, as connection to Catherine's memory. Catherine never got to know her daughter, Theodore continued. She died bringing Rose into the world. We thought if we raised Rose, it would honor Catherine's memory. But that was grief talking, not sense. Martha looked at Silas. He gave a small nod. You can visit, Martha said carefully. Like the judge ordered, but Rose gets to decide how much relationship she wants. We won't force her either way. That's fair, Margaret said. Rose, who'd been listening with a confused expression, suddenly spoke up. Did my birth mother like chickens? Margaret smiled. She loved animals, all kinds. She wanted to be a veterinarian, actually. Rose's eyes went huge. Really? Really? She used to bring home injured birds and try to nurse them back to health in her bedroom. Drove our mother crazy. I want to be a veterinarian too. Silas says I'm good with the animals because they like me, and I'm patient. Rose, breathe, Martha said, but Margaret was leaning forward, genuinely interested. What kind of animals do you have here? Chickens and horses and cows, and there's a barn cat named Whiskers who only likes Eli, but I'm working on making her like me too. And just like that, the ice broke. The next 2 weeks were strange. Not bad exactly, but complicated in ways Martha hadn't expected. Margaret spent hours with Rose, telling her stories about Catherine, showing her the few photographs they'd brought, teaching her a card game that Catherine had loved. Theodore bonded with Will over horses. Turned out he'd grown up on a farm before making his fortune in St. Louis, and he knew his way around livestock. Martha watched it all with mixed feelings. Part of her was grateful. Rose deserved to know where she came from. Deserved to have extended family who cared about her. But part of her was terrified. Terrified that Rose would see what the Blackwells could offer, travel, education, a life beyond this isolated ranch, and want it more than what Martha could give. One afternoon, she found Margaret sitting alone on the porch. "Mind if I join you?" Martha asked. "Please." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Margaret said, "She's wonderful. Rose, you've done an incredible job with her." "Thank you. I mean it. She's curious and kind and fearless. Catherine would have loved her." Martha's chest ached. "I wish I could have known Catherine. Wish I'd known the truth from the beginning." "Would it have changed anything?" "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. I loved Rose from the moment I first held her. The biology never mattered to me. But the lying—" Martha stopped. "Samuel should have told me. Men often think they're protecting us by keeping secrets. They don't realize the secrets hurt worse than the truth ever could." Margaret paused. "I did something similar to Theodore early in our marriage. Kept something from him because I thought it was for his own good. When he found out, he was furious. Not about the thing itself, but about not being trusted with the truth." "What happened?" "We almost divorced. Spent a year barely speaking. Then one day he told me that marriage without honesty was just two people living in the same house. We had to choose, really choose, whether to trust each other or keep pretending." Margaret looked at her. "We chose trust, hard as it was." Martha thought about Silas, about the conversations they'd had in the dark, sharing fears they'd never told anyone, about learning to be honest even when it hurt. "Yeah," she said, "trust is harder, but it's worth it." "Is it working? Your marriage?" Martha almost laughed. "Some days, yes. Some days I want to strangle him. Yesterday we fought about whether to fix the south fence or wait until after calving season. Stupid stuff. But we're figuring it out. That's all marriage is. Figuring it out as you go." Margaret smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you chose well. Silas is a good man." "He is. Took me a while to see it, but yeah, he's good." They sat watching the sun move across the sky. After a while, Margaret said, "I'm glad Rose has you, both of you. Theodore and I, we can offer her things, yes, but we can't offer her what you have here, this sense of belonging, a family built on choice rather than obligation." "You're her family too," Martha said. "Just a different kind." "Perhaps. But you're her mother. That's not something we can replace or compete with. And I'm done trying." The word settled something in Martha's chest that had been tight since the Blackwells first arrived. On their last night, they had a small celebration for Rose's birthday. Martha had baked a cake, lopsided and slightly burned on one side, but edible. They sang while Rose blew out 7 candles. "What did you wish for?" Eli asked. "Can't tell, or it won't come true," Rose said seriously. Later, when Martha was tucking her in, Rose said, "Ma, I like Aunt Margaret and Uncle Theodore." Martha's stomach clenched. "That's good, baby." "But I don't want to live with them." Relief flooded through her. "No? No, I want to stay here, with you and Silas and Will and Eli. This is home." Martha kissed her forehead. "Yeah, baby, this is home." "Even when I'm grown up and go away to be a veterinarian?" "Even then. Home isn't just a place, it's the people who love you and will love you no matter where you go." "Promise?" "Promise." The Blackwells left the next morning. There were tears. Margaret cried, holding Rose, and even Theodore looked misty-eyed. But they were good tears. Healing tears. "We'll write," Margaret promised, "and we'll be back next year, if that's all right." "It's all right," Martha said. They watched the carriage disappear down the road. Rose waved until it was out of sight. "You okay?" Martha asked. Rose thought about it. "Yeah, it's sad they're leaving, but also good they came. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Life settled back into routine after that. Spring turned to summer. The cattle thrived. The crops came in better than expected. Silas hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased work, which meant more money and less exhaustion. Will turned 11 and started looking less like a boy and more like a young man. He could rope cattle now, handle the horses with confidence, work a full day alongside Silas without complaint. Sometimes Martha looked at him and felt a pang of loss for the child he'd been. But mostly she felt pride. Eli came out of his shell slowly, started talking more, smiling more. He'd bonded with one of the new ranch hands, a quiet man named Sam, who taught him woodworking. Together they built birdhouses and small furniture, and once, a remarkable carving of a horse that Silas insisted on displaying in the house. Rose remained exactly herself, loud, curious, determined to befriend every creature on the ranch. She wrote letters to the Blackwells full of misspelled words and enthusiasm. They wrote back with stories about Catherine and small gifts and encouragement for her veterinary dreams. And Martha and Silas learned how to be married. It wasn't always easy. Silas had spent 8 years alone, and sometimes he still tried to handle everything himself instead of asking for help. Martha had spent years being the sole decision-maker for her family, and sometimes she forgot she had a partner now. They fought, made up, fought again, learned each other's boundaries and breaking points, figured out when to push and when to back off, but they also built something solid, something that felt less like desperation and more like choice. One evening in late summer, Martha was washing dishes when Silas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Remember when you first showed up here?" he said, half frozen and completely terrified. "I wasn't terrified. I was determined." "You were both." Martha leaned back against him. "Yeah, I was. I almost turned you away that day, came this close to saying no and walking out of Garrett's store." "Why didn't you?" "Because I looked at Will trying to protect his siblings, and I saw myself at that age, right after my father died, trying to be the man of the house when I was just a scared kid." Silas paused. "And I thought maybe if I helped you, it would mean something, would mean my father's death, my pain. All of it led somewhere good." "Did it?" "Yeah, it did." He turned her around to face him. "You saved me, Martha. I know everyone thinks I saved you by taking you in, but that's backward. I was already dead, just didn't know it yet. You brought me back to life." Martha's eyes burned. "We saved each other." "Maybe, but I got the better end of that deal." She kissed him. Long and slow, tasting coffee and summer dust and home. When they pulled apart, Silas said, "I've been thinking. Dangerous. About expanding, building onto the house, maybe another bedroom or two, a proper office, room for the family to grow." Martha's heart skipped. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying this place feels empty with just the 5 of us. I'm saying I like the noise and chaos of having kids around. I'm saying—" He stopped. "I'm saying if you wanted to have another child, our child, I'd like that." Martha had thought she was done having babies, had thought 3 children was enough, especially given everything they'd been through. But standing here in Silas's arms, imagining a child that was theirs, built from this love they'd found in the wreckage, "I'd like that too," she whispered. The baby came the following spring, a girl with Silas's eyes and Martha's stubborn chin. They named her Clara after the wife Silas had lost. Martha had worried at first that it might be painful for him, but Silas held his daughter and cried and said it felt right, like honoring the past while embracing the future. Rose was obsessed with her new sister, appointed herself chief babysitter, and took the job seriously. Will pretended to be above it all, but Martha caught him making faces at the baby when he thought no one was watching. Eli carved a mobile of wooden animals that hung above Clara's crib. The ranch continued to grow. Within 3 years, they doubled their cattle herd and purchased adjacent land. Silas built the addition he'd planned: more bedrooms, a proper office, a library that Martha filled with books. Will left at 17 to apprentice at a larger ranch 2 territories over. It nearly broke Martha's heart to watch him go, but Silas reminded her that letting children leave was part of loving them. Will rode every month and came home for Christmas. Eli stayed on the ranch, found his calling in breeding horses instead of cattle. By the time he was 20, people were coming from 3 states away to buy his stock. Rose went to veterinary college in Denver, one of the first women accepted to the program. The Blackwells helped pay for it, which they could afford and which Martha accepted with grace instead of pride. Family helped family. That's how it worked. And Martha and Silas grew old together. Not always gracefully. They still fought, still had days where they drove each other crazy. Silas's joints started aching in winter. Martha's hair went gray, then white. They buried friends and celebrated grandchildren and watched the world change around them. But they did it together. 20 years after Martha first stepped off that dying stagecoach, she stood on the same porch watching her granddaughter, Will's daughter, chase chickens through the yard exactly the way Rose used to do. Silas came out and handed her coffee. the same way he had thousands of mornings before. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of moving on?" Martha thought about the life she might have had if she'd kept going west, if she'd found work in California or Oregon or somewhere with more opportunities, if she'd never met this man or built this life. "Not once," she said. "Even when I'm being an ass?" "Especially then." He laughed, a sound she'd heard so rarely in those first months, but which came easily now. "You saved my life," Martha said, "that day in the general store. You saved all of us. You saved mine, too. Then I guess we're even." "I don't think that's how it works." "No?" Martha smiled. "Then how does it work?" Silas pulled her close, and she went willingly, fitting against him the way she had for 2 decades, the way she would for however many years they had left. "I think," he said slowly, "that love isn't about keeping score. It's not about who saved who or who gave more or who sacrificed what. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, and choosing each other over and over until the choosing becomes as natural as breathing." Martha looked up at him. This man who'd been a cold stranger once. This man who'd become her partner, her friend, her home. "Yeah," she said. "That sounds about right." They stood on the porch watching the sun set over the Wyoming plains, exactly where they were always meant to be. Not because fate had decreed it or destiny had planned it, but because they'd chosen it, chosen each other, chosen to build something good from the wreckage of what they'd lost. And in the end, Martha thought, that was what family really meant. Not blood, not obligation, not even love, though love helped. Family meant the people you chose to fight for when the world tried to tear you apart. The people you built a life with, one imperfect day at a time. The people who showed up when it mattered and stayed when it got hard. Family meant home, and home meant here, right here, with this man and these children and this life they'd somehow managed to create against every odd. Martha had started this journey with nothing but 3 starving children and nowhere left to run. She'd been desperate and terrified and convinced she'd never feel safe again. But standing here now, surrounded by family and warmth and the quiet certainty of love, she finally understood something important. She hadn't been running toward anything all those months ago. She'd been running away from pain and loss and the unbearable weight of survival. But somewhere along the way, somewhere between that frozen stagecoach and this front porch, running had turned into arriving, and arriving had turned into staying, and staying had turned into home. Inside the house, Clara called for her mother. Rose was visiting from Denver and would want to hear about Martha's day. Eli was in the barn with his horses. Will's letter sat on the table, full of news about his growing family and the ranch he was building with his wife. The life Martha had stumbled into by accident had become the life she'd choose deliberately every single day for the rest of her years. Silas squeezed her hand. "You ready to go in?" Martha looked at the sunset one more time, then she smiled. "Yeah," she said, "I'm ready." They went inside together, leaving the porch empty, but the house full. Full of noise and life and love. Full of the family they'd built from nothing but determination and hope and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other. And if that wasn't worth every frozen mile, every terrified night, every moment of doubt and fear, well, then Martha didn't know what was. But she knew this. She was home at last. Really, truly home. Not because of the ranch or the house or even the land beneath her feet, but because of the people who'd chosen to call this place home alongside her. And that, Martha thought as she closed the door behind them, was everything.